Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Legacy Premier League. We have some super exciting Magic lined up for you guys tonight. But before we get into it, just a quick word from our sponsors. You guys know them, you love them. We're really thankful for having the sponsors making this possible. We couldn't do it without them. And of course, that's Wizards of the Coast, Card Hoarder, and Scott Monroe. We're really, really thankful to have them. But yeah, I'm Eric Virgo, and I'm here with Phil Gallagher. Lots of awesome Magic lined up tonight. Let's take a look at the playoff bracket.
We're getting down to the wire here. Not too many players are remaining. We are down to just three individuals.
Yeah, so tonight we're going to start off with Julian and Javier in the winners final, and the winner of that is going to move on to the grand final. And then it's the same format as we've had the last couple of weeks, where each player is going to bring three different decks, and the player who is crowned the champion is going to have to beat all three of their opponents' decks tonight, and that'll get them onto the grand finals, which would be very exciting. So we're starting off with Javier versus Julian, and I think we have a Twitter poll to look at as well.
I'm interested to see the results of this because we have, Javier Dominguez. He's had an okay Magic run recently. Magic World Champion, card in his image, no big deal. But
Yeah,
then, we have pillar of the format Julian on the other side here.
yeah, and it looks like the Twitterverse went with Javier on this one. Not much of a surprise here. Javier is currently the world leader in Mythic points by a pretty heavy margin. So he's been having a pretty incredible year. He's hot off of a nice run at Mythic Championship 7, and he's an absolutely phenomenal Magic player. I think anybody who was watching Mythic Championship 7 was watching it this weekend was just blown away by some of the plays that he made. So I'm very excited to see him pilot some legacy decks tonight.
Yeah, I didn't watch that coverage, but I saw some statistic afterwards where it was like, oh, he has a 70% win percentage against the MPL field or something like that, where it was just like, what? Are you serious right now? Um,
Yeah, I mean
he
he
is
really
a
he
crazy talented Magic player.
absolutely. It really seems like he's top at the top of his game right now too, and phenomenally talented. So I'm really excited to get to see him play tonight. And let's see what he brought as his first deck tonight.
So we are looking at Hogak here, a deck that has popped up multiple times throughout the Legacy Premier League. Really been a popular fallback choice for many of our players. In case someone hasn't seen it before, will you just kind of walk us through the general strategy here?
Absolutely. So this deck is a graveyard based strategy that aims to play a couple of enablers like Faithless Looting or Stitcher Supplier to get some of the engine cards in its graveyard, like Gravecrawler and these sorts of things. And then it eventually casts sometimes multiple creatures through a turn to get a Vengevine into play, or it can amass enough of an army where it can cast a Hogak for 0 mana, of course. So it's basically just trying to get value out of the graveyard and play a lot of small and sometimes very big threats, basically.
So what stands out to me about this exact deck list is Lightning Axe. That is not something that we're traditionally seeing in the legacy version of this shell. So why might Javier have wanted to run this card?
Yeah, I agree. Lightning Axe is a very interesting inclusion here. It's typically the deck is typically as proactive as it can be, just because it sees itself as the aggro deck and it wants to try to end the game as quickly as possible. Lightning Axe is a very reactive card, but it's incredibly efficient for what it does. One of the key interactions with Lightning Axe and the rest of the format is that it's a 1 mana answer to Gurmag Angler, and sometimes the Delver decks who play black will play Gurmag Angler, and the Delver decks can sometimes have enough of a ground army where this deck can't just run roughshod over them. So being able to remove a key blocker like that can be very important.
I also think it's probably a hard call that Julian is going to submit multiple creature based decks.
Yes,
So I think that's an excellent, subtle metagame choice.
Yeah, so Javier looks like he did his homework here a little bit. Speaking of his opponent, Julian, let's see what he brought to the table.
All right, so this is a deck near and dear to my heart because it plays 4 copies of Thalia. This is Green White Maverick. So this is essentially a mid-range deck that has a decent amount of ramp. You get Noble Hierarch and Birds of Paradise to ramp out threats like Knight of the Reliquary. So you can use this as a wasteland engine to just completely obliterate a lot of your opponent's lands. But really, what makes Maverick shine is its flexibility. You have a lot of moving parts. Uh, sorry, this snip just cracked me up.
Mhm.
If you take a look at Julian's sideboard, there's many copies of Mindbreak trapped there. Julian was very worried that he was going to be seeing Belcher on the other side of the table, and that explains some of his sideboard choices. In case you thought that was a little bit strange.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's possible that you could make the statement that Maverick is one of the fairest decks in Legacy, if not the fairest deck. And it's always had trouble with the really unfair stuff like Charbelcher or the really fast Dark Ritual based combo decks like the Epic Storm. So Julian was hedging his bets by adding 3 Mindbreak Trap to his sideboard, which are obviously very good against those strategies. Sort of this one of these things that happens with open deck lists is that leveling goes on, and Julian is very well known for playing these, fair greens, fair strategies like elves or maverick, that sort of thing. Um, and he might have anticipated Javier bringing something to counter that, so he's hedging against that by bringing in break traps or
So,
by putting mind break trap in his deck rather.
so thinking about the matchup, who do you think is going to take this one down?
So, looking at the tools Julian has access to, particularly game one, I think we're probably going to see Javier take game one down pretty easily. But
I fully agree.
Julian has access to quite a few tools in the sideboard. Multiple copies of Tormod's Crypt, the Path to Exiles are good, and then obviously the 3 surgical extractions as well. So Julian has a lot of cards to bring in here and a lot of cards to bring out that obviously are not very effective in a matchup like this. So I'm excited to see it. And of course, Julian is a Wasteland deck. So it's possible that he could just steal a game out of nowhere just by Wastelanding Javier out of the game.
My prediction is Julian in 3, but that it's going to be exceptionally close.
I think that is a fair assessment, and I'm going to hop on board with that. Julian in 3 sounds reasonable.
All right,
And it
let's
looks
go
like,
down to the game.
yeah.
All right, looks like Javier is on the play. He is on a mulligan to 6 already, though, and it looks like he has a pretty respectable 6-card hand.
Yeah, multiple copies of Faithless Looting. Sometimes not what you want to see when you mulligan because it technically is card disadvantage, but in a deck that's specifically built around it like this and is trying to abuse graveyard interactions, that's exactly what you want to see.
I think Julian has kept a medium power level hand. His hand is sort of awkward in that he would love to green sun for a scavenging ooze, but at the same time, he might just be locked into using this first green sun to just get a Dryad Arbor to accelerate out the rest of his game plan.
Absolutely. And, that's the line that Julian's going for here. And, if he does end up getting to turn 3 where he can Green Sun Zenith for a Scavenging Ooze, he's not going to be able to activate it till his 4th turn. And that's just not going to be quick enough against this Hogak deck. So I think he makes the correct play here by accelerating.
I think his Gaia's Cradle draw is probably better than it might look in that it enables a lot of potential future lines that are very good.
Absolutely. Yeah. And Javier getting started the way that he wants to. He's already got a free creature on the battlefield, and it has a little bit of action in the graveyard, but not a ton.
He has nice tools available to him. There are 2 Faithless Looting in the graveyard for flashing back. There's a Lightning Axe for removal for if Julian does drop something like a Scavenging Ooze on this turn, and there's already a bridge there as well.
Yeah, and for those that are unaware, Putrid Imp is a zombie, so Javier is going to be able to cast that Gravecrawler in his graveyard as well.
Julian has sort of a tough turn here. If you think you can actually play the mana denial game, you can Thalia plus Wasteland this turn, but I don't really know that that's going to be profitable. So I wouldn't be surprised if Julian just drops the knight this turn, and the next turn he has access to an absolute ton of mana, and he can
Right.
do something like Sword of Fire and Ice Equip if that's going to be profitable, or he can hope to top deck something.
Yeah.
Notably, he is playing green white Maverick. There's no black splash here. There's no savior in the form of Bojuka Bog or anything like that.
Hmm. And what you were bringing up during the deck earlier, Javier drawing one of his two copies of Lightning Axe, and he's able to tag a Knight of the Reliquary before Julian is able to activate it. So we know this green white Maverick deck is really built around Knight of the Reliquary in many ways, and keeping it off the board is definitely a good sign for Javier here. Okay.
So Julian's draw here is a little bit anemic. He doesn't really want another land. He still can make his next two land drops, and the Guy's Cradle has gotten a touch worse without the knight in play.
Hmm. And it's worth noting right now that Thalia actually blocks on this battlefield relatively well. And because Faithless Looting costs 3 to flash back, Javier is not going to be able to flash these Faithless Lootings back here because of this Thalia. So um,
So you
Julian,
say Thalia blocks pretty well, and that's technically true in that it has first strike and it beats out these creatures. But the Bloodghast is going to come back, and actually killing the Stitcher's Supplier is very awkward.
mhm. Yeah, killing the Stitcher Supplier is not something that you want to do. Ooh, a Batter Skull. That's a fine draw.
That's not bad.
Yeah, and he is at 13 life, so the effective 1 damage return from the Stitcher Supplier is something that he can deal with for a little while he develops his game plan.
So Julian's plan may just become I'm going to play a Batter Skull this turn. I'm going to play a Sword of Fire and Ice and equip it next turn, and I am just going to gain an absurd amount of life. The
Yeah.
awkward thing there is that is eventually going to lose out to Bridge from Below.
Eventually, the bridge from below did get removed when Javier killed Knight of the Reliquary with the lightning axe. But it's very possible that Javier is going to be able to find another one at some point.
Yeah, we're one land draw away from just flashing back the Faithless Lootings.
And there we go.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So, what do you think's going through Javier's mind there, not playing the land and playing um, the faithless looting? To me, it seems like you want to dig for Hogak as hard as possible here.
So what he might be thinking is that waiting one turn does not appear all that scary on this board as is. So if he waits one turn, any card that he draws will let him keep one card off of Faithless Looting.
Okay.
And keeping something like, say, an Altar of Dementia could really change the texture of this game quickly.
Absolutely, especially with the Stitcher Supplier in play, he can get a lot more cards in his graveyard if he hits something like an altar.
So if you haven't played a lot of Maverick before, something you need to keep in mind is that many of your one drop plays become free if you have Gaia's Cradle. So if you draw like a Mom or a Noble Hierarch, playing that out and then tapping your Cradle means that you have essentially just played that creature for free.
Yeah, I mean, Guy's Cradle, an incredibly powerful card, and Julian's sitting here with 5 creatures on the board, so he has access to a lot of mana.
So we might be eating crow here. Julian is now in an amazing position in that he can Knight of the Reliquary for a Caracas, bounce his Hogak, swing in for 6 lifelinking damage via Batter Skull. Um, things are looking good.
Yeah, things are looking pretty good for Julian here. In a lot of ways, it sort of feels like Javier lost this game. Not as much as Julian winning it. He had multiple faithless lootings and he got off to a quick start, but he wasn't able to follow it up with something big like a Vengevine or a Hogak really quickly. And this guy's cradle was able to produce so much mana for Julian that he was just able to sort of pull ahead really quickly.
So Julian could Caracas bounce his Hogak immediately, or he could just give protection via mom and crash in with it through the Hogak, which
Yeah.
might actually be better so that he can leave up sacking Dryad Arbor at instant speed to clear out any bridges that got into the graveyard.
I was just going to make the same point. So he does have one, or Javier does have one bridge in the graveyard, and he's already equipped to block pretty well because the germ token does have vigilance. So he doesn't need to get super aggressive here. But Julian says, "All right, I just want to end this game as quick as possible. So let's bounce the Hogak, potentially waste your next turn, making the same play you made last turn, and I'll run the same play again because I still have the Caracas."
I didn't sit here and do math or anything for like clock or anything, but I wonder if Julian should have attacked with more creatures there. So assuming
So
that he gains 6
6,
off the batter
8.
skull and his opponent would attack back and he would gain at least 6 more,
Mhm.
it seems relatively safe to attack in with other creatures.
Yeah, well, I certainly don't think Javier is in a position to attack here. That batter skull, and is just a brick wall for Javier, and the Thalia still blocks, quite well. So Javier's just going to go through and recast this Hogak here, and it's almost certainly going to be met with another bounce from Miss Caracas.
So another thing to keep in mind is the size of this Knight of the Reliquary. We actually may just have lethal this turn by like moving Batterskull and the sword to it and then just giving it protection from black.
That's a good point. Actually, I believe this knight is currently one,
So
two,
that is that
three,
an
four,
8/8
five,
right
six, seven.
now?
Yeah,
Yeah. So we should be able to very easily just represent lethal this turn.
hmm
And Javier is hellbent. Nothing can go wrong. Julian sees the line.
wow.
Javier does as well and concedes.
Well, that looks like a pretty impressive showing from the Maverick deck. That game played out much differently than I thought it would. Showing the power of lands that make multiple mana. Gaia's Cradle really did a lot of work for Julian that game.
So on Julian's side, I think the sideboarding is probably going to be pretty straightforward. He has 5 graveyard hate cards that he's going to want to bring in, and we'll probably also see Path to Exile to deal with the recursive creatures as well as just the giant threat of Hogak.
And yeah, the Path to Exiles are particularly important in combination with the swords because when you look at the game that the Hogak deck plays, its really big threats are 4 Hogak and 4 Vengevine. And if you're able to sort of deal with the small ball creatures like Gravecrawler and Bloodcast, then you only really care about those big threats. And when you have a 1 mana answer for them, that's great. I think Julian is set up pretty well to deal with the small threats. He has Batter Skull, and he has Knight of the Reliquary that can attack and block pretty well. So those, the fact that he's able to deal with the small creatures and he has answers for the really big creatures out of the Hogak deck, I think puts him in a really good position post board.
Yeah. One of the things that I was sort of curious about was whether or not he would bring in the Collector Oof to shut off Altar of Dementia. It being awkward that it also would shut off his own Jitte and Batterskull. But I was wondering whether or not he was going to sub that in for the 4th Thalia.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if he leaves in the Quasali Pride Mage as a Green Sun Zenith target to deal with a potential altar. That could be a way that he can mitigate sort of the combo kill out of Javier. So Julian definitely has some options in that regard. It also looks like he's bringing in Knight of Autumn, which is another potential answer to the auto.
Yeah.
Excuse me, to the altar.
It appears that Javier has sideboarded very, very minimally.
hmm
Was that swapping 1 Lightning Axe for some other card?
Absolutely. Yeah. And when you're playing a sort of an engine based deck like this, it's really, really difficult to sideboard a lot of cards because when you do, your engine does not function properly that often. And Javier recognizes this and does very, very light sideboarding for the post board games.
Both players have amazing hands.
Yes.
Uh, so Javier's has the potential to do some absolutely disgusting things with double Vengevine, and
Mhm.
Julian is just going to blow that out of the water with the surgical extraction.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if Javier plays around that at all. Yeah, so he has the ability to play Putrid Imp and discard the 2 Vengevines into the graveyard and try and play 2 creatures in a turn. Oh,
That is a Hogak already. Welcome
that
to
is
the power of this deck. Luckily, Julian has the Swords to Plowshares.
Yeah, but that life will be welcome to Javier. So it's not exactly a free removal spell, as it were. Notably, Javier missing a land drop there. So Julian is going to take the time to play the Scavenging Ooze, sort of quote unquote tap out. So a lot of times you'll see players wait till turn 3 to play that so they can activate it immediately. But because Julian has the Surgical Extraction here, he says, "Okay, I'm already covered. Um, I think I can. I think I can run this out right now."
Yeah, so Javier can go Putrid Imp, double discard Vengevine, cast Gravecrawler, and attempt to get them back, and sort of play around Scavenging Ooze using that line.
But unfortunately for Javier, if he does go,
this Surgical is gonna be so good.
yeah, this Surgical is going to hurt. I think Javier recognizes the window that he has, and he says, "Okay, I can't let Julian untap with multiple green mana, and I have to go for these Vengevines, and it's getting met with a Surgical Extraction here, which quite honestly looks fantastic right now."
Yeah, this isn't necessarily game over, but if we look at Julian's next turn, he can Wasteland and play Stoneforge, or Wasteland and hold up an Ooze activation, or Stoneforge and hold up an Ooze activation. Like, he has so many very strong lines available to him at this point.
Yeah, and the Delver player in me recognizes that Javier missed a land drop, Wasteland in hand. Let's use the Wasteland. That's probably what I would go after. And because Javier only has a single card in hand and nothing going on in the graveyard right now, I think you probably also want to take that opportunity to play the Stoneforge Mystic.
Yeah, I think you need another body on board next turn because you know about this Lightning Axe, so you can't necessarily just like sit super safely on the Scavenging Ooze for the rest of the game.
Mm-hmm.
So I would be inclined to Wasteland.
Yeah, and here we see the Stoneforge Mystic probably getting Batter Skull. Oh, no, he does decide to get Jit. Okay.
So Julian does gain some extra information using this Surgical. So Javier did not board in Assassin's Trophy, which is something that Julian might have expected him to do.
Yeah. Assassin's Trophy is going to deal with the permanent based hate of Tormod's Crypt, Scavenging Ooze when it's on board, these sorts of things. And now that Julian knows that those answers are safe, he's probably feeling pretty good.
Javier has had a super impressive turn, by the
Yes.
way,
Yeah.
in case that is not just abundantly clear.
Yeah. While we were talking about that, Javier was able to put together a 0-mana 8/8 with a single good draw step. So very quickly, he's ahead on board this game.
I'm going to be honest, I did not expect that much of a swing in a single turn.
Yeah, that was a very, very impressive turn from Javier. I thought it would be nearly impossible to put a Hogak in play, but here we are.
So Julian willing to trade away the Stoneforge here
Wow.
to take out this bridge from below. All right, so we're seeing the Stitcher Supplier go to the way of the Dodo here. Put some more stuff in the graveyard. See if we can hit a second bridge.
Yeah, and with for those that are unaware of the interaction, when a creature dies on either side of the battlefield, the bridge from below triggers to make a zombie and to exile itself. And because you're the active player and they're your triggers, you get to choose which order they happen in. So you can choose to make the zombies first.
So Julian is in danger of just being aggroed out by these creatures here.
Yeah, he's staring at an 8/8, and he's not able to play and equip the Jit this turn. The Torment Script is going to be able to buy him some time, so Javier won't get this Bloodghast back, and he won't be able to replay this Gravecrawler. But he's losing on board right now, so it's it might be all for naught.
He has pretty good top decks. So if he can top deck a Caracas, for example, or something else that deals with the Hogak, his Scavenging Ooze is going to wall most of the stuff that's there. And without another bridge in the graveyard or something, life's okay.
Right.
Notably, though, he might need to get this Scavenging Ooze out of Lightning Axe range if he can, because he knows about that card.
Yeah. And Javier made a very interesting play right there. Before attacks, he discarded the lightning axe, um, and because of the surgical extraction, Julian knew that Javier had one lightning axe in hand. This is sort of a semi bluff saying that I don't have the lightning axe anymore, but because Javier drew his second copy, he still does, but no access to red mana right now.
Awkwardly, this also means that if he top decks the red land he needs for it, he does not have the ability to cast that.
Yeah, I agree. I actually thought it was a bit of a strange play, and I'm still trying to piece together exactly why he did that when he did. Um, but right now, Julian is lining up blocks, and this is an interesting block from Julian. He's basically saying, "All right, do you want to go so not all in, but do you want to really invest into this carrion feeder enough to kill the scavenging ooze?"
Oh, so actually, does Javier have the ability to cast this Lightning Axe anymore? We have two Badlands in exile from earlier this game, right?
Yeah, that's
So he might not be
uh,
able to cast this anymore.
yeah. One got wastelanded, and I guess the other one got flipped over to a Stitcher supplier. Wow. Okay. So Lightning Axe may just be a dead card. Still could potentially be food for a Faithless Looting, though. So not completely dead, but not really a full card at this point.
And Javier has gone for taking out the Scavenging Ooze, which I'm not too surprised about.
Oh, he can't cast Looting either. Excuse me. No access to red mana.
So we have a green sun now for x equals 2. That can be another Scavenging Ooze.
Yeah, and this Scavenging Ooze is just going to be on
That's
chump blocking duty here. Javier coming in with
that's
a
rough.
lethal attack. Yeah. So what are Julian's outs here? He's going to go to 13 and then take 8, so that'll put him to 5. And
So
there's two lethal threats on board, so a swords doesn't even do it.
yeah, he
Okay.
can play mom and equip, but Hogak's giant tramply booty is too much.
Yeah. So let's just talk about that game for a second. Javier beat a scavenging use plus a surgical extraction, getting your two Vengevines in your graveyard that would have come back into play. But he was able to play a Hogak, and Julian didn't draw a Path to Exile Swords, and he just was not able to deal with that 8/8.
That carrion feeder just absolutely took over the game. You know, I went from thinking Javier had like no way to get back in it, and then all of a sudden a body is sacrificed, a few critical cards are dumped in the graveyard, and he swung that game around in a single turn.
Yeah, that was again another impressive showing from the Hogak. I believe the last time brought it against Jarvis, and they ran the tables on Jarvis. It was a quick 3-0. Just could not deal with a horde of zombies like this. And this Hogak deck typically preys on the blue decks, but it looked pretty good there against this green white hate bear strategy.
Well, I think a lot of times decks like Death and Taxes and Maverick have a limited number of hate cards for these sorts of decks. So in many cases, you're trying to outfare them in many games. And when you're trying to outfare the deck that randomly will produce a free or very close to it 8/8 or can make a ton of zombies end game, that can be a difficult proposition.
Absolutely. And Javier looks like he has a pretty strong hand here on the draw. Multiple faithful footing plus good graveyard stuff to do. So strong hand.
Julian's hand will be able to produce a turn 2 Scavenging Ooze, which is relatively strong. I
Hmm.
bet Javier is happy to see that land because
Absolutely.
it means that he will not just immediately fold to a wasteland.
Yeah. He has to fetch a red source here to cast this faithful suiting on turn one. And okay, lands 3 and 4.
Maybe
Not what you
less
want to
happy
see,
for
but
those.
yeah. still looking pretty good here.
So I think Julian needs to tap out for the ooze here and just say, hey, whatever you can do on this turn is fine because I have 2 pieces of removal plus an ooze for the following turn.
Hmm.
Do your worst.
Oh, and Javier's worst looks pretty good this turn.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
The question I guess becomes like, how do you? Oh, another Hogak and more land.
Yeah. So let's see. What can Javier do this turn? He can play he's going to play a land to get the Bloodghast back. That's fairly obvious. He can play a Stitcher Supplier to put 3 more cards in his graveyard. And then because he'll have the Supplier and the Bloodghast, he'll be able to cast a Hogak. And because he has fetch lands, he's going to be able to retain some of the other graveyard cards in his yard, like a Faithless Looting or a Gravecrawler. So, a pretty good turn for Javier here.
One of the things that I wasn't 100% sure on, just because I'm not familiar with all the
Oh,
sequencing of the
yeah. The
of the
Vengevine,
deck,
too.
was I wasn't sure if he was supposed to play the Stitcher Supplier or the Faithless Looting first. The Stitcher Supplier gives you more looks at a Bloodghast, which you can go and return. So I wasn't 100% sure about that.
Yeah, definitely tough sequencing decisions. Lots of micro decisions that matter a lot. And it might be 50% versus 55% to hit one thing or the other, but those decisions add up over time. And Javier just an absolutely overwhelming board presence on turn 2. He has 4 creatures in play, a total of what is that, 10, 15 power. Julian's at 16 right now, but he does have access to a couple removal spells here, so he's got a fighting chance.
So um, Julian had a lot of ways to play this turn.
Hmm.
He chose to just eat 2 cards out of the graveyard immediately and hold up double removal spell. But just as easily he could have said, "Hey, I'm going to commit another creature to the board and just hold up one of the attack."
Wow. Oh, I guess this Hogak is
Uh,
getting hit with a swords
okay,
before blocks here. But yeah,
so there's now a path to exile, which will probably take out the Vengevine just to decrease the amount of damage that he's going to take in the short term.
I think if you're Julian, you can say, all right, my Scavenging Ooze is going to be able to go bigger than your Vengevine, so I might not have to deal with it with this Path to Exile. Plus, I have this Battle Scroll that's going to make it into the game in a few turns. I might not. It might be a bit of a quote unquote spew to use the path right away.
Yeah, and Julian had to do something very, very different with his mana here,
Right. So
eating another Vengevine.
in some ways, the random number generator that is involved in flipping over cards into your graveyard sort of forced Julian into that line. He's not going to have another opportunity to eat that Vengevine um, with the Scavenging Ooze, so he basically had to do it this turn.
So, in a nice turn of fortune, this means that Julian can now path to exile this Hogak and then kind of have the biggest and ooh, that's not a bad draw. The biggest and baddest creature left on board.
Yeah, Surgical is definitely not a bad draw here, and Julian's going to be left with the biggest creature on board. But the surgical isn't doing anything right now, and Julian is feeling quite a bit of pressure here.
Yeah, the life total cost of casting that for free is quite real.
Yep, not to mention he's taken a few points of damage off this Horizon Canopy, so sort of getting nickled and dimed here.
This carrion feeder could do some work
Wow, yeah,
via
with two
double
copy,
Stitcher Supplier and Gravecrawler here.
absolutely. So
I mean,
Javier is
not to
going to,
mention the Bloodghast too.
yeah, Javier is going to be able to put a lot of cards in his graveyard this turn, and for not much of a cost either. These Stitcher suppliers really aren't doing anything. That Bloodghast can come back, and so can that Gravecrawler too. So that's a great draw for Javier.
So what would Javier really be looking to hit? What's the highest upside that could happen this turn? Milling a couple of bridge from belows, probably.
I think that's Bridge from Belows are very good because you're going to get to go wide around Julian's scavenging ooze, which is important. But the way that Javier sequences this turn is very important, specifically because Julian has the path to exile. I think you definitely want to see some bridge from belows. Uh, oh wow, and just the all
I
out attack.
I
Okay,
think this makes a lot of sense.
yeah. I mean, if your smaller creatures get blocked, you can feed them to the carrion feeder, right?
Yep. So Carrion Feeder is also going to do some. If this game lasts a few turns, Carrion Feeder does some interesting things. In that, if Julian goes and tries to rely on this Batter Skull for life gain,
Mm-hmm.
it's just going to be invalidated. Javier just attacked with a giant team, turns everything sideways, and whatever is in front of the Batter Skull just gets sacrificed.
Absolutely. And just something to point out here. Legacy operates on razor thin margins. And one of the interactions going on uh, right now is Julian only has a single mana to work with. And whether or not he uses um, that mana to cast the Path to Exile or to save it for the Scavenging Ooze activation after Javier activates the carrion feeder is very, very critical. And, it's going to change the texture of the game going forward because Javier is going to be able to do multiple things this turn after combat during his second main phase. And,
So, oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, and Julian is basically forced into using the path to exile um, now just to save the 8 life.
I wonder if Julian made a misstep by not pathing the Hogak while Carrion Feeder was still on the stack.
It's possible. Having the Hogak be in exile is much more important because obviously Hogak can be cast from the graveyard, and the carrion feeder allows Javier to, in response, sacrifice to the carrion feeder. The carrion feeder gets bigger, and then he has multiple creatures in play, so he's going to be able to recast that Hogak at some point. And
Yeah. So, like,
he
now
doesn't really.
imagine we go to second main phase and Javier just sacrifices his Gravecaller, recasts it, and then he can just re-Hogak.
Absolutely, yeah. He can also do the same thing with the Bloodghast in the land in his hand. Javier's not really interested in a fourth land anyway. Um, the deck sort of tops out at 3 mana with Faithless Looting, and there's not one of those in sight anyway. Basically, everything is a 1 mana spell for Javier at this point.
So I wonder. Well, I guess Julian has the line of tapping Knight of the Reliquary and bouncing Hogak via Caracas available to him. But
Hmm.
yeah, I
And
wonder if he's going to rewatch this later and wonder if he made a mistake.
well, there's very wide decisions all over the place here. And yeah, maybe there's better plays that you could have made, but it's difficult to predict whether or not those plays would have changed the outcome of the game, which of course is not decided yet. Something that's worth noting is that the surgical extraction is going to be able to hit those Hogaks at some point, because the Javier can't put a creature into play at instant speed, and Julian's going to be able to respond to that. Oh wow! So Julian choosing to hit
Gravecrawler.
the grave
So
crawler
hitting the
here.
Gravecrawler means that he doesn't get to redeploy the Hogak, and it also stops the Carrion Feeder from potentially outgrowing things like Scavenging Ooze and Knight of the Reliquary.
Yeah, but the land drop is absolutely critical. Julian saw it. The land drop is going to be able to bring back that Bloodghast, which is going to be the second creature for Convoke, and it's going to allow Javier to cast this Hogak again.
Julian's at 4.
And he's staring
There's a
down.
large. Oh, I forgot about the Vengevine.
Yeah.
We've got that back now. So Julian is going to have access to either Caracas or Gaia's Cradle off of this night.
Mm-hmm.
So he can eat a lot of stuff, but there's not a lot of stuff left anymore.
Yeah, I think it's going to be dependent on what Julian draws for the turn, but I think it's most likely that we're going to see him go for a Caracas here, just because he's not going to be able to deal with this 8/8. It's just so big.
So the Batter Skull has the potential to do some work, but again, we have this same carrion feeder situation that we talked about before, where it can invalidate the lifelink.
Hmm. One of the subtle strengths of that card is being able to, you know, mitigate the lifelink from cards like Batterskull in the format. It's going to be an interesting turn for Julian, and he's certain. That's for sure.
So Carrion Feeder is a card that actually has seen legacy play for quite some time. I don't know if originally, but in Sam Black's Zombardment deck from, oh geez, probably like
That's a throwback, yeah.
5 years ago
I was
now
going
or
to say maybe
something like that.
2013, something
We
like
we
that.
saw the power level of that card there, although no one managed to really replicate results as far as I know with that deck.
Yeah, I think Sam Black had some success, but that was in large part due to his exceptional play skill, which a lot of people cannot mirror. So Tormod's Crypt, it's a free spell here, which is worth noting. So Julian's going to be able to do multiple things this turn.
And that's what he needs.
Yeah. But
The question is what and when.
mm-hmm.
So the Tormod's Crypt is free. We can start there. You can't really, I think, tap out for the Batterskull this turn. I just don't think it's safe to do so.
I agree. And right now, Julian has the Vengevine covered with the bigger Scavenging Ooze, but and he's got the Hogak covered with Caracas, but he doesn't have a way to deal with this Carrion Feeder currently, which is an 8/8. It's a 1-mana 8/8. And it looks like Julian is just going to be chump blocking it here. Okay.
I like this. It gives you another thing to just go and eat with Scavenging Ooze. You can hope that you can grow the Scavenging Ooze to beyond the size of the Carrion Feeder at some point.
Mm-hmm.
We could even just see Julian get Dryad
Dryad
Armor here.
Arbor. Yeah. That's something I considered as well. Dryad Arbor, you sacrifice it next turn. That's another creature for you to eat with Scavenging Ooze, and then you can potentially get into battle with the Carrion Feeder. Is the sort of the long form version of that line. But right now, Scavenging Ooze is a 7/7, so we're getting pretty close to being able to block this Carrion Feeder and trade with it.
So now, can he just Batterskull? It'll cost him 1 life off of the Horizon Canopy to do it, unless he was to fetch Cradle. He would then throw the Batterskull Germ token under Carrion Feeder.
Mm-hmm. And this is a tough spot for Julian. I think he's going to have to throw another creature into the abyss that is the Carrion Feeder here. He just doesn't have a way to make the Scavenging Ooze an 8/8 so he can trade.
So the Knight's a 3/3 now. I think he could have had lines that involved double blocking, but I think he's just going to get the Dryad Arbor and chump this turn. Just eat something else with the Scavenging Ooze, put another body in, and just like hope to play this as a game of attrition. But I don't like what he's doing to his own mana.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he wasn't able to utilize all of his mana which is that's important. But he has access to another creature in the graveyard now. So the Scavenging is the same size as the Carrion Feeder. So if Javier wants to make it bigger, he's going to have to go through and sacrifice this Bloodghast or this Vengevine. So I know Javier's still ahead from that perspective.
So the other thing is that the Knight of the Reliquary actually might be able to beat out this Carrion Feeder in combat soon, because Julian will have lines like Wasteland myself, sacrifice my Horizon Canopy, activate Knight,
Yeah,
This knight can get
sacrifice
big in a hurry.
my marsh flats as well. Yeah, so the Knight of the Reliquary can grow quite a bit here. Um, there's one, two, three, four lands right now, which makes Knight a 6/6. The activation makes it a 7/7. Cracking Horizon Canopy can make it an 8/8, and if he wastelands himself, he can make it a 10/10, which would be bigger than the Carrion Feeder.
So now we're seeing the Batterskull line where the Batterskull Germ can hop in front of Carrion Feeder for a turn.
Yeah, for a turn, and then he's going to be able to equip the Batterskull to potentially his Knight of the Reliquary, and he has by far the biggest creature on board, and it has lifelink and vigilance, so it attacks and blocks super, super well. Wow, I think Julian might be pulling ahead here. A couple of sort of anemic draws from Javier, and
Oh,
Jid is a nice pickup as well.
well, kind of.
Yeah, I don't think you play it this turn, but next turn it can help close the game out.
So this Scavenging Ooze is obnoxiously large now. And Bloodghast cannot block, so it's going to have to be Vengevine, sack that to Carrion Feeder.
Yeah, I mean, Julian is really far ahead on board right now. He has this Tormod's Crypt as insurance, and I think Javier, in two turn cycles here, we've seen Julian go from being under the abyss to Javier being under the abyss now too. Javier doesn't have to block, but if he gets, one connection with this Scavenging Ooze, the game is effectively over at that. Wow.
Javier's hand is very weak here.
Yeah, he needs to draw a Faithless Looting and fast.
So I wonder if this is good enough to prompt a Tormod's Crypt.
I probably
I feel
not.
like the answer is no.
Yeah, I mean, you have two huge creatures on the battlefield. Bloodghast is a 2/1 that can't block. Like, I think you're pretty okay with um, creatures like that being around.
So how big is this Scavenging Ooze
It's
actually? Is
currently
that
an
a
11/11.
14? No, 11/11?
Hmm.
Oh, thank you. So putting the knight in the graveyard represents just one more thing that can be eaten by this Scavenging Ooze. Although Julian has lost one of his mana due to the knight disappearing.
Right. And this Jit may be able to seal things up here.
We're
Julian not equipping.
not seeing
Interesting.
an equip.
I guess he's just planning on using all of his mana to eat the Vengevine and the Knight in the graveyard. Okay, Altar of Dementia. That's a way for Javier to get things going a little bit here, but it's going to be tough in the face of that Tormod's Crypt, which Julian still has. Julian has been unbelievably patient with that Tormod's Crypt. He recognizes that the stuff that's gone on in the game so far is just not a big enough deal. He's able to mitigate it, and he still has access to it, which is pretty big here.
So I think Julian has played this game with huge end game foresight in mind.
Mm-hmm.
Like from the time that Carrion Feeder hit play. Oh,
Wow, and
is
a double Bloodghast. Okay, that
I
might be
think
enough
this
to.
gets.
Yeah, I think that's going to be enough to warrant the Tormod script, and we do see it out of Julian. Javier having access to two fetch lands, so he's able to activate it again in response. The Bloodghast will come back at instant speed, so Javier is still going to be able to do quite a bit of milling with this Altar of Dementia.
Yeah, so Julian made a very good play in that he used the Tormod's Crypt first. Now that the fetch land has been cracked, he can use his Scavenging Ooze to go and eat those.
Right, and he still
So in
has
case you
access.
were wondering, why didn't he just do that? That's what was happening.
Mm-hmm. So that's actually some pretty good technical play from Julian.
Another thing I want to point out is how well Julian has done with using this Horizon Canopy. So it's kind of like sat there as this rattlesnake land for a long time, in that it has represented a card, it has represented a scavenging ooze activation, um, and it's done a lot just sitting there that we maybe haven't talked about.
Wow. And while you were talking there, Javier made a quote unquote all in play. He sacrificed his carrion feeder to flip over, I believe it was 10 cards into his graveyard. And he hit a faithful suiting, but it didn't look. So he has a putrid imp. He has access to a putrid imp as well. So that's a blocker.
So
Did
that
he
land
did
can
he
get
hit two
back
more blood ghasts?
blood gas. Yeah, there's two
And
more blood gas in
and
there.
he only has 5 cards left in his library. So he's gonna be able to cast a Hogak here too.
And there's 3 bridges?
Oh, Julian still had access to a green mana, so he's gonna be able to get one.
Hey, there's that Horizon Canopy doing some work now. Good job, Horizon Canopy. So
And
Javier can.
Javier fetched there, but I don't think he had another land to.
Oh,
Oh
wow.
my god. That one came right down to the wire. Oh my, that was tight, and I think that was very well played at the end there by Julian. Being very patient with the Torment's Crypt, leaving up the mana for the Scavenging Ooze to play around the multiple Bloodghast activations due to the fetch lands at instant speed. That was a very, very tight game, and we ultimately saw Scavenging Ooze plus Batterskull, seal the deal. Pretty incredible.
That's a game that I'm going to go back to later and rewatch, because I think there was a lot of really great play on both sides and a ton of decision trees.
Absolutely. There were multiple points at the game where either one of those players could have taken a different line and it would have changed the how the rest of the game played out. And because the game lasted, what was that, turn 9 or something like that?
It was a long game for a
That
Hogak match.
that's a long game for a Hogak match. Um, it's very interesting to see what could have happened. But Julian is up 1-0, and we still have some more Magic for Javier and Julian to play. We're going to take a quick break, and we will be back in a bit.
Hey, folks, welcome back to the Legacy Premier League. And wow, what a match we just had with Julian coming out ahead. We thought that might happen, but I don't think we expected the games to go quite like that. What did you think of that one from the audience perspective?
I think, and that was definitely some interesting games. It's always it's always fun to see Maverick play because the games tend to go quite. Uh, I mean, if you sidestep the ones where someone just murders Maverick in the first two turns, the games tend to get quite intricate and the board states get quite complex. And this was definitely one of them too.
Yeah. I've played a lot of Maverick and I played against Maverick a lot. And many times, those are the matches that go to time or very close to it. Not because anyone's playing slowly, but because you've just played so much intricate magic. And I love it.
Oh, yeah, definitely interesting. Definitely skill testers.
So speaking of skill testing, now we get into the interesting portion of the Iron Man tournament where we get the counter picking aspect. So Javier had two different decks that he could bring to the table, and it looks like he has chosen to bring a bug control deck to the table. Why don't we go ahead and pull up that deck list? Beautiful. Gilded Goose in Legacy. Let's do it. So I know you're a big fan of bug decks. You played a lot of them to great results in the past. Why don't you talk us through what this deck list is trying to do? Now, obviously, it's a control deck, but there's a little more nuance to it than that.
Yeah, so it's really, I mean, the thing about bug is you tend to there's sort of three elements to this deck, I would say. I think one is to try and present quite a bit of disruption, which is how you tend to just wreck your opponent off their game plan. So that's why if you look at this, you tend to see a fair amount of discard and removal. And yeah, here the interesting bit is that Javier has chosen not to play the Forces main, relying instead on, if you will, his discard and his more hateful permanents to just get the way. Probably also relying somewhat on the fact that Julian is likely to not bring, if you will, the strongest combo decks.
Yeah, if you look at this, there's 3 Plague Engineers in this main deck. 4 Fatal Push, Liliana's Triumph, Snapcaster Mages to flash some of this stuff back, Oko, Lily, and Jace to control the board. And note, this is Lily Last Hope. This is not Liliana of the Veil like you might expect. I think this is a very good anti-Julian deck list.
Yeah, and the thing that I would add, and that may seem a little subtle, but for me, actually, one of the things that really is going to help the matchup is the gooses, because the way the bug versus different tax or maverick matchup tends to play out is that there's a it's really, firstly, it's about, do you get to cast your spells, because quite often Thalia plus Wasteland just gets you and you don't even get to play magic. And then if you can bridge that first, those couple of, if you will, the early game, then that's where you need the haymakers, all of your sweepers and your planeswalkers to take over. And so the goose is what's going to allow all of his Lilianas and his Snapcasters and his Plague Engineers to really start wrecking Julian.
This is a little bit of an exaggeration. So I say that knowing this, but Gilded Goose is sort of like a Deathrite Shaman for this deck, in that it is a piece of mana acceleration early when you need that, and late game, it's also a mana sink as well. You know, once you get to the point where you have Oko out, being able to generate an extra food every turn is actually pretty darn useful.
No, I mean, for sure. For sure, particularly in this sort of matchup, which has both the, if you will, the early pressure on the mana, but also the potential to go very late. I mean, we could see some quite long grinding games here.
And I think Javier is very well equipped for those. I can't overstate enough how good these Plague Engineers are going to be. They name human, they sweep some of the smaller stuff off the battlefield, and then they are going to be able to trade with a creature like Scavenging Ooze or Knight of the Reliquary. And he's also going to have things like the Submerges and Abrupt Decays in the sideboard, too.
Yeah, it's not a super hateful sideboard, I would say. Although, again, there is the full place in a Plague Engineer, which speaks to Javier's respect for that card. When I used to play Bug, I think one of the first things I would do in all of my deck lists is to make sure that I was jamming 3 or 4 sweepers in here. And I think Javier has just kind of just moved those main, which is going to help him a lot.
Yeah, so you don't see things like Toxic Deluge that you might expect from this deck because Plague Engineer does a lot of that same heavy lifting. So who do you think is favored in this match?
So this is kind of interesting. I haven't played enough Bug versus Maverick specifically, because Maverick is different than Death and Taxes here with the Plague Engineers to really tell. I would guess that Bug is favored, particularly in the post-board games, but I think even in the pre-board games as well with some of this stuff.
Yeah, I think Javier is favored as well. And one of the subtle things, I think, is that his mana base is relatively black, so the chokes that we might have seen out of Julian's sideboard are not necessarily the biggest haymakers as they might have been with a slightly different mana base.
Yeah, but I mean, don't discount Maverick here. I think I've usually felt advantage playing Bug versus Maverick, and I've been burned enough times to have a great amount of respect for that little random green-white creature deck on the other side.
Oh, absolutely. And with that being said, let's jump down to the game. It looks like both players are going to be mulliganing, though. And we may see Javier mulligan a second time here. He has a no-lander here. Julian has an awkward hand as well, but I think he'll probably keep this.
Yeah, this can really go wrong for Julian as well.
Yeah, so he has great cards for the matchup. Sylvan Library is like an A+ card. This enchantment is not coming off the battlefield if it sticks, but he does not have green mana in his 2-color deck.
Yeah, I think this is very interesting because both players are really trying to jam a turn 1 mana accelerant to make their decks function, and none of them have it in this spot.
Yeah, this is going to be an interesting thought seize. Javier is going to have the choice of taking the Thalia, which is an immediately annoying card, or taking the Sylvan Library, which is a devastating card as the game goes long. Thalai takes Thalia. And then the top deck, Forest for Sylvan Library, is just chef's kiss good here.
Yeah. Did you notice, by the way, the speed with which Thalia was taken? I mean, Javier was, he knew what he wanted to do in that go.
Yeah, he sure did. I would have paused there, and I would have tanked on that decision for a little bit longer. Like, given my mulligan, I don't know that I would have been very confident that I could have beaten the Sylvan Library as this game went long.
But maybe Javier thinks his late game is strong enough that he can beat the Sylvan Library, but the Thalia plus the Wasteland might just KO him.
Oh, geez. So that's such a crazy good draw. Another thing that
Oh. So remember we talked about those 2 levels, one being do you get to cast spells, and the other being the long and grindy game? This was done in level 1. This is what losing in level 1 looks like.
All right. I do want to finish talking about a thought, though. I think Javier's thought on taking the Thalia first is that if he draws land 3, he might be able to Snapcaster Thoughtseize the Sylvan Library before it comes down. I think that was his thought process.
Yeah, I mean, there's also an effect you can beat it, because what tends to happen with the Maverick deck, if they don't have mana accelerants, is they tend to just play 1 spell a turn. And what that means is if your deck is full of Planeswalkers and Sweepers, I want to call them in terms of Plague Engineers, like you can still beat Sylvan because you are going to play 1 spell a turn that generates more than killing their creature, and they are going to play 1 spell a turn. So I can kind of see what was happening there.
Julian probably is not going to do all that much in terms of sideboarding. He has these chokes, which again, as we've talked about, are kind of medium. We have a handful of, well, really a lot of non-island lands. There's 3 bayous in the deck, a forest, a swamp. So you probably end up playing these chokes, but I don't think they're going to be the game-ending card that we might expect them to be. I expect Julian to trim a couple of humans here. Well, maybe not. We see trimming swords to plowshares instead. I'm not sure how I feel about that. Swords to plowshares is the answer you're looking for to Plague Engineer. Let's see what Javier is doing. Looks like he's bringing in Submerge and Decay and Engineer.
Yeah, so both of the players really, I would say, not changing the texture of their deck particularly. They're just sort of trimming some of the cards they consider bad to bring in better ones.
Yeah,
Choke
like
and Gideon are probably the only major additions on either side, I would say.
yeah, Javier has some things like Leovold, which while they can do things in the matchup, they're not necessarily where you want to be. You know, it's very color intensive, for example, against a Wasteland deck. Both players look like they have reasonable hands. I expect both of them to be keeping here.
Yeah, so this hand on Julian's side does exactly what Julian wants it to, in terms of going Noble Hierarchy into Thalia, and then try and leverage that into a, how do you say, getting ahead on board quicker. So that's where the Fatal Push is actually quite important from Javier's side.
Yeah, so we can see Javier lead on basic into basic if he'd like, and then just deploy Baleful Strix as a speed bump, hopefully drawing him into his third land, which in fact it does.
Yeah, so Javier has seems to have successfully bridged the game into level 2, which is where we both get to play Magic.
Oh, so drawing 2 lands in a row there is actually quite good, because with Sea, Island, Swamp, he didn't have the green that he would need for Oko.
Yeah, and carefully just deploying things, lands that cannot be wasted.
So that Ponder did not shuffle, by the way, so whatever Javier saw there, he wanted. So Thalia crashes in, and I expect we're just going to see a Knight from Julian here. Knight is really awkward against Oko in that investing 3 mana into it only to have it elked is a super feel bad moment. Although we're probably just going to see it get fatal pushed here, and Javier can build more of a board before he has to commit the Oko.
Yeah, so this really being, if you will, a bit of a board state war that was highly influenced by the fact that the Noble Hierarch was fatal pushed on turn 1. That to me is sort of the secretly defining play of this game. And you also kind of see Julian here try to regain the tempo by just getting Noble Hierarch.
Yeah, every creature that he has on Inquisition here is interesting. I don't know that that's what you really want. He has some lines, like he could elk the Thalia and then Inquisition this turn, which is what we're going to see him do. And immediately the sword goes away. Protection from, the board right now is too scary.
Yeah, so it's very clear that Javier knows what he wants to do in this matchup when you see the speed at which he Inquisitions.
This Baleful Strix attack.
That's weird.
Is weird.
That's also not happening. Snapcaster would make
sense. Snapcaster, I think, should attack.
Okay. Are we just happy taking 4 to Oko, or we know Pride Mage is coming out?
This is a really good turn for Julian. Julian gets to kill the Oko because of the double Exalted here.
I'm really wondering why that Baleful Strix attacked. Like, I have a hard time knowing what it was Javier was thinking here.
I'm also a little bit unsure there.
That being said, now he has Fatal Push Snapcaster, which is going to take care of quite a lot of threats.
So what is going back with this brainstorm? I think the Bayou goes back. Are you just putting back Bayou Delta, redrawing Delta next turn?
Yeah, I think you probably want to get Whatever you're putting back, you want to redraw here. I guess one thing that could have been going through Javier's mind is the Thalias in Julian's hand, that he doesn't actually want to kill the Thalia on board.
Oh, that's actually really heads up. Yeah, if he kills the elk Thalia, then the other Thalias become live. Man, if he noticed that just like at this quickest of glances, that is super impressive. Great next level thinking.
He's yeah, he has I would say quite the ability to maneuver the complexity here. All right, so why is he considering fatal pushing? He's considering trying to get rid of the Exalted here. So why is that important?
It feels like Baleful Strix just trades for whatever creature if you're willing to make the trade. Otherwise, you can fatal push later. So,
but
like,
I guess that was kind of yeah. Yeah, so maybe that's what's going through his mind is he may not actually have been intending to block here if he had been fatal pushing. Oh.
So I slightly wonder if he's even going to fatal push here, or if he'll just wait until end of turn so that another Thalia can't be deployed.
Yeah, I kind of suspect that's what's going to happen. I mean, the loyalty on Oko is not that important, but he kills it. He gets rid of it.
I mean, I guess you can just elk the next one and you end up in a similar situation. So he'll get to take the Snapcaster off the top, use that to get rid of the Thalia. Alternatively, I guess he could just swap the food for the Thalia. -5, right? So he could swap that and then have Snapcaster push for the Hierarch and just leave Julian with food and 3 lands.
So this is interesting. So Javier has, I would say, less respect for the board that Julian has built up than what he suspects Julian can top deck and goes for Ponder rather than trying to kill something.
Yeah, I can see digging for more resources here. I probably personally would have gone aggressively after these creatures, but boy, is he rewarded with a Tarmogoyf here. That is a fantastic thing to go and add to the board here. I think it's going to be relatively large as well. Yeah, a 6/7.
Yeah. It's actually interesting because Tarmogoyf generally is not that good in the matchup, but right here it looks excellent. The other thing, by the way, if Javier had found at some point finds a Plague Engineer on this board, the entirety of Julian's board just disappears, vaporizes.
All right, so now we're going to see a Source of Plowshares on this Tarmogoyf. We can see an attack in for 3 on the Oko. But then Julian doesn't have much going on afterwards.
Yeah. You know, this looks like one of those top deck wars, except one person has Oko and cantrips, and the other person has more Thalias.
So Javier now has an interesting decision. He can choose to re-brainstorm immediately if he would like to just get 1 deeper and then fetch away, or he can wait just patiently another turn, draw the Verdant Catacombs, and then re-brainstorm.
I mean, there's no real reason to be in a hurry here.
Yeah, I think I like getting deeper because of how devastating a Plague Engineer is on this board. And that might be part of the reason why we saw him cantripping over attacking the board. What was that, 2 turns ago now?
Plague Engineer. Okay.
So now we see the awkward attack with a Thalia, play a defensive Thalia afterwards.
This is
All right, Javier not finding the best of resources here, but I don't think that's going to matter too much.
No.
So like he can just attack in with 2 foods this turn, and the Elks will, deal 6 or force a chump block, either this turn or the next turn. That is
charge of the Elks.
That is not what Julian needs here. Yes, the second Thalia is build your own vigilance the hard way.
Yeah. So now the interesting thing is Julian going to be changing? Is he bringing back in Sword to Plowshares now?
Yes, it looks like he's at 62 cards now. Oh, nope, he's sticking with the 2 copies of Swords to Plowshares that he had before.
Okay.
He's considering boarding out this Qasali Pride Mage. So Qasali Pride Mage is good against Baleful Strix, and it can sometimes muck with some of like the Oko food shenanigans. All right, Julian on the play with an extremely weak hand. I expect to see a mulligan here. And we do see that, and a wonderful, wonderful Sylvan Library opener is the reward.
Ooh. So this is going to be interesting because depending on so this is kind of the thing that happens when you have a turn 1 bird here is Javier will have to choose whether to Inquisition or to push the bird. So if he pushes the bird, he slows down Julian, but then he gets libraried, and if he Inquisitions, then Julian's on 3 mana on turn 2.
I believe the saying is always bolt the bird. Allowing Maverick to potentially make multiple plays in a single turn, I think is scary, but we see Javier taking the time to think it through. If he lets Julian untap something like a Thalia or a Sylvan Library that could massively change the pace of the game comes down.
Ooh. He did not take the library.
I
think
don't know about that one.
Decay. He has the abrupt decay.
You're just gonna blow the decay on that and just take the 1-for-1 trade there. That's probably fine.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah. I was gonna say, I wonder if we're gonna see. Oh. So here is a reason why you might want to have kept an abrupt decay around. The choke only getting one of the 2 lands here, though. As we talked about, Javier has access to a number of bayous as well as forests, and the Gilded Goose can also produce some mana. Julian drawing a land there is actually pretty good. That means the Jitte is online this turn. Unfortunately for him, there's also this Fatal Push looming in the distance.
I think this game will turn out to be one long series of disappointments for Julian.
So he's going to need a new creature with power. If he can get that within 2 turns, I think there's hope for him, but I think if he, bricks on his next 2 draws. Oh, that's pretty good.
I think the doctor is going to purge birds.
So, do you just name bird with this one and take out the birds of paradise? I think you do. I think you take that 1-for-1.
Look, Philip. I play a lot of Plague Engineer Legacy at the moment, and I think bird is probably my most named type. Although not Birds of Paradise, I would say that's probably not the one I'm usually taking out.
So just to talk through it, if he had named human with that Plague Engineer, he would have cut off Mom, Thalia, Knight of Autumn is also a human, ? I forget if that's a human or if I just greedily play it in my human sideboard. Yeah, it's a Dryad Knight.
It must be. Oh.
Yeah. And then you also cut off the Noble Hierarchs as well. So Julian has really cut down on his opponent's mana. One of the Gilded Geese is still around. But Javier can't cast his Baleful Strix right now, so he's kind of forced into a holding pattern. We may see this game spin around here. So
Javier instantly failed pushing that far, yeah.
This costs one of the 2 remaining food. Submerge, not a bad draw. Oh, wow, Julian ripping hot fire off of the top here.
Another general observation from having played against a lot of Maverick is that deck does tend to top deck better than you think it does. Ooh, fatal push again.
All right, but the geese are out of food. Noble Hierarch can equip this Jisse and get in there. You know, Julian doesn't know about this Submerge, but things are looking scary for Javier.
Hey, I think even if this gets submerged, I mean, that's a good chance we're still in this game.
Yeah, you redraw your X1, or sorry, your 0-1 and play it next turn. Yep. Like that is not the end of the world. So a land is a good draw. It allows the creation of a food, but that's an island, so it's not going to untap.
I think this is what we call Lotus Petal in our control deck.
Okay, another land. That's wonderful. This could be a swamp. This could be just like tap out for the Oko. You know, turn the Jisse into an elk and just try to like beat it out from there.
Oh. The elks are coming to town.
So this is a little awkward, though, because he's going to create this elk. It'll be a 3/3. It'll actually attack for 4 due to the Exalted, so it represents instant death on the Oko. So it requires a gilded, or sorry, the Oko hadn't lost yet. It represents a lot of damage on the Oko.
And Batterskull can now be hardcast because of the 2 dudes.
Oh,
we may see Julian take
this.
Oh
boy, this is a great game of Magic. I am enjoying this a lot. So Javier has a lot of lines available to him. He can play this Tarmogoyf. He can create a food with Oko in order to cast the Baleful Strix by sacrificing the food to Gilded Goose. Instead, we are seeing the Batterskull get elked, and Tarmogoyf being sort of the biggest and baddest thing on board.
So the question is, do you trade an elk for the goose? And the answer is no, you do not.
So Oko being able to create a food and allow him to actually cast some of these ponders is probably going to be meaningful as this game goes on, but I do think you have to take a turn to stop this mom from giving protection from green to one of the creatures.
So now I think we'll see Julian just swing all the elks at Oko, and that's going to get that's going to trade an elk for the Oko. Yeah.
Yeah, and then he'll get to play a Mother of Runes on a board where he still has a bunch of power. Note that a lot of Julian's top decks are going to be relatively strong since he has enough mana to do just about anything. So a Green Sun, for example, could allow him to get a Giant Knight or Giant Scavenging Ooze. All right, so we're seeing a Ponder.
So that's interesting. Not choosing to deploy the Jace.
So he's looking at Baleful Strix, Liliana the Last Hope, and Polluted Delta. Powerful cards in their own right. Strix is probably going on bottom here, it looks like. And we're going to see... Oh, nope. So Lily is the draw. then Delta on top, Strix on bottom. So this allows you.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Continue.
This allows him to play the Strix this turn, just get another body on board, and then he can play Liliana next turn.
But noticeably here, out of timing, right? Because if we'd been able to deploy the Liliana this turn, he would have been able to eat the mom and have a dominating board position. And now the mom is going to make the Liliana somewhat ineffective. Ooh, and this Ramanab excavator is interesting.
So, is it though? So Javier has 3 basics, only 2 of which are untapping right now. And Julian doesn't really have something like a Horizon Canopy in the graveyard. He can like get back a Dryad Arbor repeatedly, and that's cool and all, in that it walls the Tarmogoyf.
So there's another interesting thing here, which is that Javier has Plague Engineer in the graveyard.
Oh God.
So... oh.
All right. In case you're not familiar with what could happen here, Liliana's lesser used -2 allows you to get a creature from your graveyard. So he can go and name human with this to take out both Mother of Runes and Noble Hierarch. You know, and that'll probably be pretty strong.
But since Julian, it was interesting that Julian chose to use the mother here. I'm actually kind of surprised about that.
Well, Julian might
know. Yeah, continue.
Julian might feel that he has to stay aggressive in order to stay in this game because another Planeswalker coming down is so devastating, or Plague Engineer coming down is so devastating, and he just loses so much of his board presence to all of that. So he might have felt like he just needs to keep pressuring Javier's life total. I think Julian is in a very bad spot now.
Yeah, this game has been fairly swingy.
So
are we going to see the Plague Engineer?
He can Plague Engineer. He can also just like continue to uptick the Liliana and ping off the Noble Hierarch this turn, the Dryad Arbor the following turn, and just intend on ending this game via the Liliana emblem.
The Tarmogoyf getting to just stand in the way is very significant here.
This is going to be a large Knight of the Reliquary.
That is going to be bigger than Tarmogoyf.
Javier creating some blue mana with his Goose.
I think what we will end up seeing here. Okay, do we have mana enough? Not really. I was going to say Jace for Mind Sculptor bouncing Knight of a Reliquary is a bit of an eternal play.
Yeah.
Something we've been doing against Maverick. I think I've been doing against Maverick for like 8 years or something.
It feels real bad. Can confirm from experience.
Back in the old days, we used to follow that up with plain stuff for extra value. Ooh. But yeah, this looks pretty bad for our little green hero.
So there's going to be a lot of really interesting lines over the next few turns. Because of this Ramunap Excavator, Julian can keep playing Dryad Arbor from the graveyard and potentially sack it with Knight of the Reliquary if he can ever get an untapped. But that is somewhat big of an ask right now.
I think what we're probably going to have to see is Julian suiciding in to be able to kill that Jace.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see the Jitte and Excavator attack in after he plays Dryad Arbor from the graveyard, kill the Jace, and then try to use this Knight to take over the game. This may ultimately allow Javier to get something important off of the board with the Liliana's Triumph, though. So we can Lily Plus kill the Dryad Arbor, Triumph, which I guess kills the Jitte Elk, and then hope to beat out this knight via the Baleful Strix that's still in his hand.
One other interesting observation here. Javier is really close to ultimating that Liliana.
So that ultimate is beatable via Maverick. A lot of times it involves like Batterskull lifelink, and it's not pretty. This mom is not as bad of a draw as it looks. So you can use that to get through the zombie horde. All right, Julian going for the classic get Horizon Canopy, take a redraw line.
So why are we playing the mom here?
You play the mom because it stops the Liliana ultimate for a turn, or they ultimate and you get Knight to go through zombies.
Yeah, so I'm wondering if I mean, yeah, because as you say, the alternative play is to try and bait him to get rid of the Liliana at 7 and then hope to get through it.
Is this Stoneforge gonna do enough? It gets Batterskull. Oh no, Sword of Fire Nice.
Ooh, the Sword of How Nice.
So what is this playing towards? So you play and equips sword. You attack in, you get chump blocked, and then what? Oh, this game has gone on so long that I've forgotten some things that have already happened. Someone in chat points out that Batterskull and Jitte are already in the graveyard. That's just the best line that he has available to him.
Okay. Digging more with Canopy. The question is, what can he dig towards here?
He doesn't have anything like Banishing Light, right? Not in this version. Yeah, he's not playing Banishing Light, so he didn't have that to dig towards. And now that this emblem is in play, life is not good. Julian does not want to be drawing lands there. I expect to see an immediate Horizon Canopy activation. So Julian now needs to play towards a Mother of Runes, I believe. So Knight of the Reliquary does represent lethal in a single swing.
So here he's probably hoping to get rid of that Gilded Goose to allow the Mother to be an out later.
Yeah, so if you take your opponent off of one color of creatures, you have outs to win via Mother of Runes.
Yeah, okay, he just scooped.
All right, but he has left Javier with 9 power in play, and that just ends the game immediately. So Javier's deck choice here really paid off for him that game. Like we just saw the power level of those 3 mana planeswalkers, both Oko and Liliana, the last hope, just absolutely taking over those board states. And as we kind of discussed previously, the choke, while powerful, was totally able to be played around by Javier.
The bird really had a lot of value in that game. I think the bird is probably the secret hero.
Yeah. Gilded Goose, it's no Deathrite Shaman, but boy, it was super impressive that game.
I mean, it was interesting. It was one of those, like, I remember when we were playtesting again some years ago, we were playing a lot around with the Shardless deck. And the Shardless deck was just always so much better when it had Deathrite Chain. It was just incredible. We were at the level where we were considering adding Noble Hierarch to the deck. And I think this is sort of a similar effect.
All right. So we'll see what the counter picking brings us next. We will be right back in just a minute, and I hope you're all enjoying.
All right, welcome back here for match 3 of Javier versus Julian. Um, right now, it's tied at 1-1, meaning that each player is going to have to defeat 2 more of their opponent's decks to move on to the grand finals. Javier took the last match playing his Bug Oko deck, which means that Julian has to select a new deck this round. And let's take a look at what he chose to bring.
Ooh, this is exciting.
Yeah, this is a fun deck, and if you haven't seen it before, it's a deck called Bomberman, which isn't really descriptive of what it actually does. So, what's going on here with this deck, HJ?
Well, so I would actually argue that it is descriptive because here's how this match is going to go. So Julian is going to use a technique that I like to call carpet bombing.
Okay.
So he is going to. So he has the Monastery Mentors, he has the Khans, he has Mystic Forge, and he has Oryx Salvages, all of which Javier has to deal with or die. And now Julian is just going to, as fast as sling as many of these in Javier's face and check Javier if he passes the exam. And if Javier does not pass all the exams, then he fails this match.
Yeah, and most notably, Javier only has a single copy of Force of Will in his deck, game 1. So because we have a known deck list, Julian knows this, and it means he's going to feel very, very confident just jamming those threats into play. But it is worth noting that, if he does play an Aurillac Salvagers or a Mystic Forge or something like that, and he's not able to actually win the game that turn or effectively win the game that turn, Oko covers all of those threats. So the way Julian paces his quote unquote threats during this matchup is going to be super, super important.
One notable thing also is this deck is fairly one of the key early. A lot of these threats cost 3 or 4 mana, but and so this deck tends to bridge that by playing Chalice and Chalice is good against Javier, but it's not as good as against, say, a Delver deck because Javier can actually play Magic with Chalice.
Right. And for those of you that are unaware, sort of the key interaction in this deck is Aurillac Salvagers plus Lyman's Eye Diamond. So Aurillac Salvagers is a creature with a 2-mana activated ability that says return target artifact card from your graveyard to your hand. So the combo with Lion's Eye Diamond is you sacrifice Lion's Eye Diamond to make 3 mana. You use 2 of that mana to return the Aurillac or to return the Lion's Eye Diamond back to your hand. You recast the Lion's Eye Diamond, sacrifice it for additional 3 mana. So you've netted 1 mana at this point. Rinse and repeat. You make infinite white mana. You make, and then you go through and you can make infinite mana of any color. And then the deck has a number of ways to actually win the game from that point. So because you're playing Urza's Bauble, Mishra's Bauble, that sort of thing, you can go through and effectively draw the rest of your deck. Or you can make a giant walking ballista and kill your opponent that way. So there are a number of ways to just end the game. And it looks like our players are ready here. So let's head down to the match. Okay, we have Javier on the play here, which is going to be pretty important for him. Having turn 1 on the play with no fear of Chalice is nice because he's going to be able to play a Gilded Goose and be able to accelerate on mana.
Both players having somewhat shaky hands, I would say. So Javier only having 1 land, and Julian being able to make 3 mana, but notably not 4, which is what all of his threats in hand cost.
Yeah, one of the things that we might see out of Julian is drawing another 0 mana spell or 0 mana artifact, which he did. So he's going to be able to turn on that first Mox Opal. So that could potentially be mana 3 next turn, and then play a second Mox Opal, and that'll be mana 4. So he may be able to, if things work out for him here, he may be able to play this Karn of Aurillac Salvagers on turn 2. And right now, Javier with no real interaction in his hand, but he does have a copy of Brainstorm, so he's going to get quite a few looks at it. And land is a great draw here for Javier.
Yeah, and Javier actually has quite a lot of removal. So the Aurillac Salvages is going to bite the dust fairly quickly.
Plague Engineer, not really what you want to see from Javier. It does have some play in the matchup because Monastery Mentor making a bunch of monk tokens is one of Julian's victory conditions. But it's not an all-star like it is against, Death and Taxes or Elves or something like that.
Notably not choosing to crack the Delta or do something, probably wanting to rely on the Fatal Push as an actual spell, which
Right.
requires him to have the fetch land in play.
And it looks like Julian is going to go for a 4-mana spell here, utilizing one of his Mox Opals as a Lotus Petal. Now, the question is, do you play Auriok Salvagers here, or do you play Karn?
I think you play Karn here, would be my guess. This, by the way, is where Javier gets a for not playing the Tarmogoyf last turn. Now, the question is, what does Karn do out of all the many things it can?
Yeah, and this is one of the real powers of Karn is that because when you build your deck, you put a bunch of silver bullets in your sideboard. You have a lot of optionality when actually wishing with Karn. So we get to see quite a few options here for Julian. He can try and set up for a late game where he's able to play a Mycosynth Lattice and lock Javier out of the game. Probably not what you want to do here. He could go for a card drawing engine like Mystic Forge. That seems pretty good right now because the board is at parity, and that is what Julian ends up selecting. Okay.
Yeah, so this puts Javier in quite an awkward spot.
And a little bit of a greedy line there from Julian. Julian is only going to have access to 3 lands next turn, so he has to make sure that Mox Opal is able to produce mana so he can cast this Mystic Forge. So he has to find a 0-mana artifact.
I think we're just going to see Julian kill Javier on the spot in a moment.
Yeah, now that Javier has tapped out for a Jace, actually, what Julian's going to be able to do here is minus Karn for a Lion's Eye Diamond, which he has access to in his sideboard. That'll turn on the Mox Opal for the 4th mana for Auriok Salvagers, and then we're going to get to see Julian loop. And he also has Ancient Tomb as well. Okay, so this should be fairly academic at this point for Julian.
So Auriok Salvages and Lion's Eye Diamonds, so that's going to make infinite mana. And the Mystic Forge is going to have them churn through the
deck. Yeah, he can churn through the deck in 2 different ways. He can actually play the Mystic Forge out. He can also pull the baubles back from his graveyard using the infinite mana and the Auriok Salvage ability, so he can just have 20 or 30 cards in hand next turn, that sort of thing.
Okay.
Which is not technically 100% win, but it's very easy to put a win together at that point.
So if you're Julian, I guess you go fetch the Lion's Eye Diamond and you play the Lion's Eye Diamond. And if Javier doesn't force the Lion's Eye Diamond, then he's flat out cold, right?
Correct. And the chances that Javier has the actual Force of Will are quite low because he only has the single copy in his main deck. So if you're Julian, you have to be smelling blood here and just go for it. Let's see if this prompts a concession from Javier.
No, Javier wants to see what's going on. He wants to see the party go.
Yeah, that's fair. It's not a deterministic kill here, sort of like what I was saying before. But Julian is going to be able to, loop through, make a bunch of mana, and draw 20, 30 cards next turn, whatever he sees fit. He technically could draw his entire deck minus a few cards. And then, the kill next turn will be play a Monastery Mentor, cast a bunch of 0-mana artifacts, go from there. But it's not an instantaneous kill. It's worth noting that if Julian does have to kill through a Monastery Mentor here, though, access to a Plague Engineer from Javier would be able to shut that down, but it's very likely that he'll be able to set up a kill with Walking Ballista next turn.
Yeah, I think this kill definitely, for me, falls under the definition of, if you look at your opponent's cards and they do something and you don't understand what it is, you should probably just say no.
Yeah, that's a good heuristic for vintage, or for excuse me, for legacy, is that if there's something going on where you're not entirely sure what it is, just counter it. That's what Force of Will's for, right?
Oh. So that's why we play Delver decks, right?
Yeah, I play Delver decks that my opponents don't have any lands in play, and I just never even have to make that sort of decision. It's a lot easier that way.
Yeah. See, I have that too. That's also why I tend to play him. My opponent cannot outplay me if they don't have any cards.
Yeah, I mean, that is, in all seriousness, that is actually one of the reasons to play the Delver decks, is that a certain percentage of the time you get to execute that mana denial strategy, and it just you don't get a free win, but it's effectively a win. Okay, and Javier conceding here, he sees the writing on the wall and he's ready to move to game 2. So the question is, what do we see Javier bring in here? I think he has quite a few good options in his sideboard, and possibly the best one being Leyline of the Void, right?
Yeah, Leyline's interesting, right? Because it stops the combo, but back to what we talked about around carpet bombing is it doesn't stop the Mystic Forge or the Khans. But maybe if you can Leyline him and then Plague Engineer Monk, then you can get far enough that you can sort of handle the rest of Julian's deck.
Yeah. And how do you feel about Grafdigger's Cage to fight Mystic Forge? Do you think that's too narrow?
So Grafdigger's Cage actually stops Mystic Forge?
Yeah, Grafdigger's Cage reads you can't cast cards from your library. It's an interaction that actually not a lot of people know about, but it stops cards like Bolas's Citadel or Mystic Forge itself.
Ooh, that is interesting. I have learned something today. I will be boarding in more Grafdigger's Cages. No, I would definitely. I mean, if I look at Javier and what options Javier has, I mean, this is not the greatest of matchups. I think we're looking to board in even slightly narrow cards to get there.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. But bringing in, I think a total copy of 4 forces, so he gets 3 Force of Wills and a Force of Negation. It's going to change the texture of this matchup quite a bit. Game 1, Julian knew he pretty much had the ability to tap out for his big cards there. It's going to be a lot different this game.
I mean, to be fair, there's a whole bunch of Force of Wills, but there's also quite a lot of decays and sort of other solutions here, as well as Tarmogoyfs to pressure Khan. So Javier could be doing okay.
Yeah, and it might mean that Julian has to play like a longer game plan where he sits behind an ensnaring bridge for a while, and he does some work to run Javier out of Abrupt Decays first with like a Monastery Mentor, that sort of thing. And this is one of the hands out of the Bomberman deck that you're always. It's tough to keep this sort of hand. You have fast mana with Ancient Tomb and City of Traders. You have a way around the Force of Wills with Cavern of Souls, and you have some redraws with the Baubles. But this hand doesn't actually do anything. It's sort of a tenuous hand, and I think we probably see Julian in the tank here over whether or not he wants to keep. Javier, I think, has a clear keep here. He has access to some disruption with Abrupt Decay. He has a Jace, which is a good mid to late game spell, and he has a Ponder to find what he needs. So it's a clear keep from Javier. He has good lands and spells. What do you do if you're Julian here?
I think I'm rolling in this. I mean, maybe I'm being a little more aggressive, but I think we're a little bit. Oh, this was good.
Sometimes you just draw Chalice of the Void off the top. I mean, and that makes this hand so much better. But Javier does have the Abrupt Decay for it, so he's going to be able to play a reasonable game of Magic.
Yeah, I mean this actually comes back to the fact that Javier can actually play a perfectly reasonable game. I mean, he doesn't even need to kill the chalice if Julian has something that's scarier. So if Julian say jams a mentor now, then that abrupt decay will find a different time.
Oh wow!
But I guess we're seeing Mystic Forge.
Mystic Forge with 2 Lion's-Eye Diamond. So if this Mystic Forge sticks, and it looks like it's going to, Julian is going to have access to a lot of different spells, or excuse me, a lot of spells this turn. It's a card advantage engine, and with 6 mana available, he might be able to just have an insane turn here.
I will say I think Julian is very good at Magic in more ways than one.
Yes, he's had a couple of very good draw steps here. But he did have the couple redraws with the baubles, so not totally unreasonable. And a little bit unlucky.
Stopped.
The fun stopped quite quickly there. Well, with the Ancient Tomb and the hopefully, forgive me, I forget the name of that spell. The 4 mana enchantment that exiles, but exiles an on-land permanent. Cast out, yes. And
Oko, time the Oko off the top.
Yes,
Javier is also very good at Magic.
One good top deck deserves another, and this Oko is gonna shut down this Mystic Forge and stymie Julian's development here by quite a bit. But Julian has access to 6 mana this turn. He can play a Ballista and shoot down this Oko now. Which I think is probably the line.
Yeah, so you have Ballista. Ballista stays at 1, which means you can just keep pumping Ballista. So that's not necessarily so bad.
It's not bad, but your mana sources are Ancient Tombs, and you're already at 11. So you need to be a little careful about doing that sort of stuff. It's something that comes up often in Ancient Tomb decks that most people don't think about very much. There is a very significant cost, especially when you draw multiple copies of the card.
Yeah, particularly with the card Delver of Secrets as play on turn 1.
Yes.
All right. So this was kind of interesting, opting to play the Snapcaster rather than jam at Jace, but I guess under the assumption that Jace was not going to survive and hit the table.
Yeah, I think if you play the Jace, it's effectively a 4-mana Brainstorm, because I don't think you can afford to bounce the Mystic Forge, because that Julian would just recast it next turn, and he's going to be able to, effectively draw a bunch of cards. So that ponder was a keep, finding Javier a Brainstorm. So he is behind on board here, but he has enough life. Oh wow, another Mystic Forge from Julian.
Oh, the circus starts again. But it's actually very interesting because I think I'm becoming more and more aware of how, with all of the 3-mana Planeswalkers in Legacy, you really want to have a board presence. So it doesn't feel like having a random free elk in play is all that important, but it actually really is because it's shutting off the Jace.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah. The presence of the Planeswalkers in the format have really increased the value of having small creatures that you can pressure Planeswalkers with. And, this Brainstorm, Javier goes digging for Force of Will for his Mystic Forge, but he's unable to find it. And that's sort of that threat density out of the Bomberman deck that we were talking about before. Okay, now we get to see Julian really draw a lot of cards here. He hits another copy of Ancient Tomb, which is going to slow him down this turn, but Javier currently doesn't have an answer to this Mystic Forge, and Julian's going to be up on quite a few cards this turn, unless Javier is able to put something together.
But you're sort of right. I mean, if Javier was playing a deck with, I would be very scared being Julian right now.
Yes.
Or if the Delver had been in play from turn 1, this game would look very differently.
Yeah, that's another reason to play Delver. Just getting the game over quickly is normally a thing that you want to do in Legacy, because every Legacy deck that's not Delver has access to like super powerful late games, and that's what we're going to see here out of Julian this turn. Oh, but Force of Negation is an okay pickup. And this Tarmogoyf is representing lethal next turn, so it's really on Julian to put something together here now. But Mystic Forge is probably going to be able to do that. Oh, and multiple lands on top of the library for Julian is. It looks like his luck from the first few turns is running out. He's going to be on chump blocking duty here.
So notably, we have the line side diamonds can be used to pump. Oh, that's what we're going to see now.
Yeah, so Julian's saying, all right, my hand has a bunch of lands. I don't need them. I have access to a ton of mana already. I'm going to use this Lion's Eye Diamond, pump my Walking Ballista, and that's going to give him the ability to control the board here a little bit better.
Yeah, so I'm guessing we'll see the Mystic Forge jump in front of the Tarmogoyf, and then the Ballista gets to control a little bit here.
Yeah.
Unless Javier kills a blocker already now.
I think you probably attack with Snapcaster and Tarmogoyf, because attacking with the Snapcaster, well, I mean, it just gets eaten by the Walking Ballista. That's not even a good attack. So it's probably just the Tarmogoyf serving here. And
well, I mean, you may as well attack with the Snapcaster if you know it's going to get eaten anyways.
Well, the logic behind not attacking with Snapcaster is that if Julian wanted to eat it, it would use a counter off of the Walking Ballista, so you do get some value that way. But now the Ballista can just naturally block the Snapcaster because it's a 3/3. The Mystic Forge can block the Tarmogoyf, and Julian gets another untap step here.
Yeah, I see what you mean. How big is the Tarmogoyf? Can we shoot it with Ballista? I guess not after risk damage on it.
Right.
Yeah, no, that's not going to work out.
All right, Javier digging for another Forcible here.
Yeah, so here's an interesting interaction. Because there's damage on the Ballista, then Julian cannot, if he removes the counter from it, it dies as state-based effect. So he cannot use all the counters on Jace.
Right. And I think if you're Julian, you just let this happen, and you get to untap with a Mystic Forge in play, and hope for the best.
It's good enough.
Hope it's good enough. I mean, he's gotten pretty unlucky the last few turns. He's cleared a lot of lands from his deck, so the land density in his deck has actually gone down quite a bit, and there's a good chance we'll get to see a big turn from him. But there's still a lot of cards. Whoa. Julian choosing to go to 1 here in order to put another counter on the Walking Ballista.
Is he trying to kill Jace here?
I'm
sure that's what that must be.
Well, being at 1 life specifically is a big deal, because it means you can't activate Mystic Forge if you do find another blank, something like a Monastery Mentor or another land or an Auriok Salvagers. So
I guess this is where Julian just I guess that's how we win this game, right?
Yeah, and
we have Lineside Diamond. Yep.
Well,
the circus is rolling.
No, it's not. The Mystic Forge only casts colorless spells from your deck. So because Auriok Salvagers is white, you can't cast it. Yeah, and quick pressure from the Tarmogoyf is able to close it out there. Okay, so now that Julian is on the play, do you think his game plan in the matchup is gonna change at all?
I don't think it changes significantly. I mean, you're kind of trying to do the same thing.
Yeah.
I think it does get better when you're on the play, but you're still just trying to carpet bomb Javier.
I agree. And I think we're probably going to see Julian mulligan a little bit more aggressively on the play, because he is a Chalice of the Void deck. And Chalice on the play turn 1 is just so much more effective than when you're on the draw. Letting the blue player cast a cantrip or something like that can be all the difference in a game.
Yeah, the those of us who tend to keep everything that do tend to get punished by turn 1 chalice.
It's a brutal card. And sometimes I wish it didn't exist.
So notably, Javier bringing in the cage as you predicted.
Yeah, and I don't think you want to overload on them. Like drawing a second copy is terrible. So I can see the logic of only playing one. 4 brainstorm, 3 ponder, plus Jaces means you're going to get to see a lot of your deck, and you don't ever want to see a second copy of the card for the most part. So just playing the single copy, I think, is fine.
Javier also boarding out a Plague Engineer.
Yeah.
So again, probably the logic being with 3, he should be able to find them. Question being, can he find them quick enough?
Okay. And we see turn 1 Chalice from Julian and multiple 4-mana threats. I think this is a clear keep.
So, but it's actually kind of more interesting than you would think if I look at this, right? Because if you're turn 1 challenging, you're doing it through City of Traders, which means you're shutting off your 4-mana threats. So to me, these are always kind of like awkward hands to look at. We'll see what he does here.
Yeah, and Julian thinking the same thing as you, and foregoing the turn 1 Chalice with the City of Traders, and he's going to wait till turn 2 to cast it off of 2 single mana producing lands.
And Thoughtseize incoming.
Not to mention Javier drew Force of Negation, so everything's coming up Millhouse, as it were, coming up Javier.
And this is the kind of draw you're hoping to get if you're on the opposite side of the bomb deck.
Absolutely, and he has multiple copies of Brainstorm in hand as well. So he's going to be able to sculpt his hand specifically with the knowledge of what's in Julian's hand right now, and he's in a great position here.
That being the case, I mean, so remember we talked about carpet bombing. So Julian has 3 big bombs here. So one of the ways that the Bomberman deck wins is by just jamming bomb after bomb after bomb,
right,
until Javier just runs out of ways to say no to him. So it may look like Javier can say plenty of no, but he does not have 3 forces and 3 blue cards.
Yeah.
And by the way, there's also Cavern of Souls in play, which means some of this he doesn't even get to have an opinion on.
Right. Ooh, another Chalice. That's a welcome sight. Now, one of the interactions specifically is Javier has Force of Negation, which exiles any spell that it counters. It doesn't interact with the Auriok Salvagers, obviously, for multiple reasons. But if he does end up countering a Lion's Eye Diamond with it, Julian won't be able to get it back and continue comboing that way. So he's going to be able to do a good job of just keeping these Auriok Salvagers as 2/4 value engines here. Oh, Fatal Push, a great draw. Must be good to be the world champ, right?
Yeah, I want to be this good at Magic. But
so now he does have 3 forces.
But it's a little bit interesting, right? Because Julian playing out the salvagers did put Javier in a little bit of a tough spot here. And if Julian just keeps going, so next turn he jams another salvagers. I mean, Javier has a fatal push, but he only has 1 fatal push.
Yeah, and Javier is highly incentivized to cast it here because when he thought sees Julian, he only saw 1 copy of the Auriok Salvagers. So he's probably thinking, okay, I have the Force of Will / Force of Negation for this Karn, so I should be in a pretty good spot.
So here Julian can choose to sacrifice a City of Traders so that he has 6 mana to allow him to get value out of the Auriok Salvagers immediately.
Right. That is one potential line. You can also choose to use that 2 mana for a Chalice of the Void on 1, and then follow it up with a Karn. So a turn where you play 2 threats rather than play 1 threat with value. That's sort of the decision tree that you want to make here. Do I play 2 threats this turn or 1 threat and try to get some value off of it?
Ooh, and Julian runs into Force of Will with Can't.
Yeah. And Javier just choosing Force of Negation there so he doesn't lose a life. That's a small edge.
So, but you are putting Javier in a tough spot here because so he has the Jace and the Force. So now Javier has to decide: does he jam the Jace and go down a blue card? He probably does. He's going to brainstorm into more blue.
Okay. Cage is a little bit of insurance of what's going on, so oh, that's a lot of good cards.
I guess that's why we play Bug, right? It's a deck that's full of good cards.
Yeah, that's why we play blue. We get to brainstorm into a bunch of good cards. But this Force of Will is going to require, or excuse me, this Chalice of the Void is going to prompt a Force of Will from Javier here. He has multiple 1-mana spells available to him next turn, and the Chalice would shut all of that down. So you have to imagine that Julian is going to play it here too.
Well, again, there's also the option of just getting value. But I guess with Jace out, you probably want to mitigate the Jace effect somewhat by making sure that what you Jace into is not too broken.
Yeah.
And that would suggest playing Chalice.
Actually, the presence of Jace is a good point in terms of informing your decision here if you're Julian. Putting a creature on the board that can pressure the Planeswalker or prompt a minus activation so he can't brainstorm again, it does actually have quite a bit of value to it. So we might see Julian run the Auriok line. Oh, no, but he does choose to go with the Chalice of the Void. Wow, and Javier lets it snap resolve.
Probably, and Julian does not play the salvagers.
Wow,
Playing very patiently.
Yeah, that is very, very patient here. So we also know that Javier has an Inquisition of Kalik. Yep. And Tarmogoyf looks pretty good here too. Okay.
Yeah, this game is with Jason play. This is where the game starts to spiral out of control.
Mm-hmm. Javier just gets to go up on so many cards, both in terms of card economy, like in raw card advantage, and in card quality too, because he's going to find a shuffle effect at some point for these cards that he doesn't want.
I guess one of the things, Julian is kind of hoping to top deck an LED so that he can start like really going off with the Cavern of Souls for protection. I mean, with Chalice in play, Chalice shuts off Fatal Potion. Abrupt Decay cannot kill the Salvagers.
Yeah, so
I think there is.
Once Salvagers is in play, it's very, very well protected for that turn. But obviously, if Javier gets an untap, it's a different story. And now we see the Salvagers hit the battlefield.
Yeah, Julian clearly, how to say, running out of time or patience.
Yeah, and Auriok Salvagers is technically a card advantage engine here because Julian's going to be able to recur baubles over time, but that is mana intensive because it costs 2 mana a turn, and he doesn't get the card immediately. So technically speaking, he's on pace with Javier for cards here, where they're each getting an additional card a turn. But the brainstorm is just so absurdly more powerful out of the Jace that I think you have to favor Javier here just because his card quality is going to be so much better.
Yeah, but Javier notably missing a way to interact with that Auriok.
Well, I mean, Jace Bounce is a way to interact, right? And that's what we see Javier choose to go with. He also, I think he also probably recognizes quite a bit of weakness at Julian right now. Playing a Salvagers and just getting back a bauble is somewhat, I would call it a weak line. Considering how powerful the plays this deck can produce, I think Javier is just going to try and end the game as quick as possible and close it out with a Tarmogoyf.
Ooh.
Okay, Lyman's Eye Diamond is a draw, but Javier, still has that force of will and those force of wills in hand, so he's going to be able to shut that down at least quickly. If Julian is able to set up a turn where he has 6 mana available, which it doesn't look like he can here, he'd be able to play the Auriok Salvagers, play the Lion's Eye Diamond, get it counter, use 2 mana to get it back, and then start looping. But it looks like he only has 5 available this turn. So that won't be an option for him now.
He can also just kill the Jace.
He can also just kill the Jace, yes.
Notably, one of the caverns names Construct.
Oh, that's something I didn't notice. The text is a little bit too blurred here to read. I assumed it was on human, but that's a nice play from Julian.
So Julian here checking to see if Javier is willing to force the Lion's Eye Diamond. And if he forces the Lion's Eye Diamond, then the question is whether Salvages gets played or Ballistic gets played. But if he doesn't force the Lion's Eye Diamond, we're probably seeing Salvages enter play.
Well, if he doesn't force Lion's Eye Diamond, the game is over, right? Or let's see. If he doesn't force Lion's Eye Diamond, Julian plays Auriok Salvagers, leaving the Cavern of Souls up, and then he goes to make infinite mana, and then kills with Walking Ballista this turn. So Javier making the correct play. He knows Julian has the Auriok Salvagers to loop with. And I think we're going to see a dead Jace here, most likely.
But it's actually an interesting question here. Like, do you kill the Jace on the spot? Or do you play the Ballista out to block Tarmogoyf and then try and get rid of Jace?
So let's see. You're getting attacked for 7 next turn. That puts you to 6 life, and then you're probably gonna have to activate your Ancient Tomb, which brings you to 4. I think that's okay because you play around a potential Oko, make your food an elk. That would put you to 1 that turn. So I think you probably had the window to kill Jace there.
I guess the other thing going on here is, did we as
Thoughtseize.
Oh
no, but there's Chalice in play still.
There's Chalice in play. None of it. These are all just blank pieces of cardboard.
Wow.
So
now do we see block shoot or maybe just a block?
Oh, we don't see anything. So I guess Julian just closes the game here, right?
Yeah, so now Julian gets to make an infinite mana with the Lion's Eye Diamond or loop. He'll pay 2 mana to get the Ballista back, or just spend the infinite mana pumping the Ballista in play. He can win the game however he chooses. And there we go. Julian goes up 2-1 against the reigning world champion, Javier Dominguez. Wow.
So notice how here this game is like, for me, a lot of the texture of this game was decided by the Chalice that shut off the force of wills to really make this very, very awkward on Javier's side.
Yeah, Chalice of the Void did an enormous amount of work that game. The Grafdigger's Cage that it stopped wasn't relevant that game because there was no Mystic Forge, but it did stop Inquisition, which I think would have been a good play at some point. And then he drew, I think, a copy of Gilded Goose and Thoughtseize right at the end there, which the Thoughtseize would have probably ended the game in his favor. He would have taken the Auriok Salvagers and then untapped and killed him. So, yeah, the Bomberman deck looking pretty impressive right there, and we're going to get to see it again next round. But before we go, I believe we have a raffle. So let's bring that up. All right. And if you've been with us before, you've seen these, but they're still awesome, still wonderful. If you're interested in winning a set of dice, you can type Card Hoarder in the chat, and then we will pick a winner at random. So if you're interested in that, go ahead and type Card Hoarder in the chat. While that's going on, Hans, have you had a chance to holiday cube yet?
No, I've been busy playing Vintage and Legacy. So I'm generally just trying to see if I can break Mystic Sanctuary in all formats.
Well, it's a pretty broken card, so I think you can. But
I'm telling you, I painful truth and mirror same painful truth. It felt pretty good.
that is something else.
It was just my Grixis Delver deck as well, just to make him extra happy.
And I believe this isn't the only match we have going on tonight. Is that correct? We also will have Autumn playing against. I believe it is the loser of this match. So whoever loses this Iron Man event will face Autumn immediately afterwards. So we'll get to see their decks in action again. All right, and for those of you that just joined the channel due to the raid, there's currently a raffle going on. So if you're interested in winning the beautiful dice that you see on screen right now, type Card Hoarder in the chat, and you'll get a chance to win some free dice. And I think we're just about done here with the raffle. Okay, and the winner of the raffle is Corvinius37. So if that's you, please contact It's Julian on Twitch, and he'll get you set up with those dice and send them out to you. So congratulations. All right. Well, that was fun. I believe we have round four of this Iron Man coming up next. And Javier has selected the deck that has won the most recent Legacy GP. So if you were, following the coverage for that, you're going to get to see that deck in action. And it's honestly, it's a pretty cool one. It's kind of a new take on some stuff that's been happening in Legacy recently. So we'll be back in a few minutes, and we'll see you then.
Yo, welcome back, everyone. I'm joined by my good friend, Brian Koval. Welcome to the LPL, Brian. I think this is the first time you've been on, right?
Yeah, Julian asked me last week if I could commentate some playoff matches, but I was unfortunately busy. But tonight I'm wide open, so I'm excited to be able to be here.
Yeah, so we're going to be watching two great players play the fourth match. The score is currently 2-1 in Julian's favor. I think the matchup is going to be Bomberman versus Bug Zenith. I have not played with the Bug Zenith deck, but I know both you and I have played a fair amount with Bomberman. And
Yeah,
let's take a look.
Yeah, I've played a lot of Bomberman, and I recorded a league this week on my YouTube with this Bug Zenith deck. So I have 5 matches worth of experience with that.
So give me your initial thoughts on this deck then.
I think the Zenith package is cuter than it is good. In the league that I played, I played against a just bug mid-range deck. They didn't have the Zenith package, but they did have like Snapcaster and Thoughtseize and just good cards. And I felt wildly outclassed. But the Zenith package is super cool. If you get the wheels turning and you get a little time to make interesting decisions, if you ever put Questing Beast into play, it feels pretty sweet.
So specifically in this matchup, do you think the Zenith package is going to have a huge impact? Most notably, the best card for Javier to have would be Collector Oof, but there's no Collector Oof.
Yeah, he doesn't have a Collector Oof. Scavenging Ooze is kind of anemic. Like if you can somehow get like several green mana up with that card, that's one line. You notably can't Zenith for Plague Engineer and kill monks, which is rough. Questing Beast doesn't do anything. Tireless Tracker, and if they get into that grindy situation where Javier survives the first wave, that's pretty good. Leovold can shut down the draw your deck plan. So there's some stuff there, but none of it's really exciting.
So it seems kind of tough, but I frankly think it's going to be relatively draw dependent, and I think the players are ready. So let's see how it plays out. All right. So Julian's on the play. Interesting. Kind of surprised. Well, what did you think of their opening hands?
So Julian is on a turn 2 Mentor plus 2 Monks. He's just trying to drive it home here. Oh, that's even better. It's turn 2 Mentor and 3 Monks.
Yeah, that actually improves the hand quite a bit. And you'll have the follow-up of Karn the Great Creator next turn.
Yeah, and that Ancient Tomb just sent this hand into the stratosphere. I thought it was playable anyway.
Yeah, Javier's hand is not the best. Considering the damage is going to be done, like, you're going to have to decay the thing next turn, but the monks will already be made.
Right, and he didn't use Bayou to Zenith, so he can't decay and push in the same turn, so he's going to take a full turn of damage from these monks.
Yeah, and the hardest part of this is you can't even cast your Force of Will.
Yeah. Yeah, this hand had one of the ramp creatures in Green Sun Zenith. You play 8 ramp creatures effectively, and in my experience, those are really important. But you have to ramp somewhere. This hand ramped into Abrupt Decay.
Yeah, your mentor tokens are going to get the job done.
Yeah, they are. That's the wrong art, unfortunately, but they're still going to do it here. So Karn's a trigger, Lotus Petal's a trigger. Karn can wish for something castable to get another trigger.
Honestly, you could just get Walking Ballista and go for the threat.
He can crack LED, wish for Mystic Forge, and just go ape.
That's also pretty reasonable. Because your Karn didn't get Force of Will, so it's like almost impossible for your other thing to get Force of Will.
Yeah, there's no way that they just give you Karn if they can stop it.
Yeah, that was a lightning quick game. I mean, Julian's hand was fine, and then became very good, I think, his the reality.
Yeah, it turns out that Ancient Tomb is a powerful Magic card.
So from Julian's side, I wouldn't expect to see too much sideboarding because I think you're sort of pre-boarded. I think Javier is going to gain a lot more traction in the matchup post board.
Yeah, Javier tonight made a lot of decisions not to main deck Force of Will. Just his other list had only one main. This one has two.
Oh,
So his forces are coming in, but
yeah.
that's about it. I guess you're priced into bringing in Surgical, even though it's not great. He's probably has to bring in the ley lines too.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of a deck configured to play against Bomberman, this would not be my favorite like macro archetype, but you do what you can, right?
Yeah, so I think he has to bring in the ley lines to stop Plan A and the Plague Engineers to stop Plan B. If he can get both hooks in and make Julian play fair, then he's going to win. But either one of Julian's unfair plans can just smush him.
Yeah, but we did see that Julian has to be careful about running a creature out early because of the presence of 4 Okos. And we especially saw that in the last match, but I think it's going to play here too because both players know that there are 4 Okos in the deck.
Right.
So, yeah, I think Julian's just deciding if this is... Oh, Julian hasn't even taken the cards out yet. He's deciding if he wants to side out the chalices, and it looks like 1 Urza's Bauble.
That's pretty reasonable.
Yeah.
Yeah, Javier cutting all the coatls. They don't do anything in this matchup. He needs to make room for 8 cards. I'm surprised Questing Beast is still in his pile. I guess if he's trying to get over the finish line over some monks. But
I think, frankly, it's just...
killing Karn is good too.
Yeah. The other part of it is, I think... Oh, Julian submitted 65 accents. They're going to fix it real quick.
Oh.
Going to fake, reset game 2. We'll be right back with that. But I think even Questing Beast in is fine, mostly because the Quaddles are kind of do-nothings, and trying to kill your opponent in a bad matchup is a reasonable way to go, I think.
Right. Yeah, I didn't see everything that Javier cut. Did he bring in all 8 of the cards? I thought he would. The ley lines, the engineers, and the forces.
It was 3 ley lines, I think, but it looked like that combination of cards you were referring to.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, we'll get right back to the match in a second, but yeah, that game 1, lightning quick. I certainly hope it doesn't go that way for Javier's sake in the next 2 games.
Yeah, all the matches have been really exciting so far, and for it to end in 6 turns once I finally get my crack in the booth, be disappointing for everyone, I think.
Yeah. I assume you watched the Hogak match.
I did.
That one was pretty exciting. A lot of counterplay on the Maverick side, I think.
Yeah, there were multiple turns of multiple games where I was like, oh, Javier can't lose. Then like 1.5 turns later, it's like, oh, Julian can't lose. And then Julian loses. And that just happened multiple times. That's good magic.
All right. I think we're ready to get back to the match. And here we go. Javier is going to 6 cards.
All right, he's got a ley line and an ooze. You don't need the ooze if you have the ley line, but...
Yeah, it's still a grizzly bear.
Yep.
Oh, Javier's on 5? Maybe? Javier's on 5, Julian's on 6.
All right, so Julian has a hand that's super soft to Wasteland. And Javier he has ley line, he can ramp, and he has Wasteland, so he can turn to ooze plus waste. So
yeah,
that's a pretty good 5.
The problem with that, I think, is a lot of the games of Grizzly Bear is not going to be good enough.
Right, but at this point, are you going to 4?
Yeah, no. I agree with the keep. I'm just saying it's just an observation more than anything else, right?
Yeah. So I think Julian's just gonna incinerate this Stride Arbor. His opponent's on 5. Get your 1 for 1.
Okay, so interesting. If you reveal Gilded Goose, do you still incinerate the Dryad Arbor? Like you saw Goose from the bauble, right?
Did he do the bauble on his turn?
Yeah.
Okay, then yeah, I probably still do
Okay.
because Zenith is really mana hungry. Like your super juicy targets cost 4, like Zenith +3 to get the Leovold or the Tracker, the Courser. All right, so Javier's all in here. If Julian can stabilize this board, he certainly has more exciting top decks.
So you could burn the Lotus Petal.
Oh, Disenchant.
Disenchant's probably going to be good at some point. So if you really cared, which I'm not convinced you do, you could just burn all of your resources to kill the ooze, right?
Yeah, but
Oh
don't
no, that
think
doesn't
you
even
care
work. That actually doesn't even work because you can just sack the food for green and eat your own Dryad
Right.
Arbor, right?
Right.
So that's not going to happen.
Yeah, so I think we're going to see an end step Disenchant Leyline and then hope to just rip LED.
One OED later and Javier will be very dead. However, what you can try to do is, I guess, develop your board with like Salvagers, Petal, and a Ballista. Obviously, you can't recur anything with the ooze out. Like, it's difficult to do so.
Right.
But you can just play a slow, grindy game, right? Sort of a weird mono-white Jundy game is how I would put it.
Yeah. All right, so now Julian can decide, does he want to Ballista for 2, or does he want to play Salvagers? And if he does play Salvagers, does he just City it, or does he Cavern Petal it?
Both are interesting decisions. I'm not sure what I would do. There's also the third decision of just not do anything. Yeah. I think they all have different upsides, so. Okay, so it might not look like you can revolt that push, but you can sack food to the goose, float a mana, or you could, sack your food and then sack the other food to your goose, which I guess doesn't actually make sense.
Yep, that makes no sense at all, Jarvis. Thank you for your contribution. All right, there's the LED.
Okay, but so the push can break it up, though.
Yeah, so can the ooze. So it's extremely broken up. That's not a line. He has to work through this ooze with Walking Ballista before he does anything else.
Which is going to be difficult because it's effectively a 3/3, right?
Yes.
I guess you have the Petal, so you. Oh, but the Ballista will be in the graveyard, right?
On the third ping, yes. This is a multi-turn endeavor. Oh, he's just ramming into Fatal Push. That's fine.
Yeah, I mean, obviously he does not know Javier's hand like we do.
Right.
And actually, Javier did something really much smarter, which is float a green off of the food and then use the swamp to push so you can double activate Scavenging Ooze.
Yep, super tight.
Yeah.
He is better at Magic than I am, for sure.
And myself as well.
I think it's safe to say he's on a Magic card. We are not.
You're close. You have a Monk token.
That's true. If you ask my grandmother, I am the Magic World Champion with my own card. All right, so this is a large Ballista. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we can Ballista for 4. That still doesn't kill ooze, though.
Yeah, that's right.
And you lose your city and your Petal along the way.
Yeah. But it looks like we're going for it.
Yeah, I mean, it's the play he has. He can't just not make any spells in the face of this ooze.
Yeah, the problem with waiting is you just take damage and you have an Ancient Tomb as one of your own. So I think you're just incentivized to do something right now, right?
Yeah.
Wait. Oh, the cavern was on human, right?
Right. It was not on construct.
Yeah. Um,
Yeah, so that wouldn't have been able to kill Ooze even if it resolved, because the last ping puts the ballista in the graveyard where Ooze can eat it and then become a 5/5.
crazy. 5-card hand from Javier takes it down. I mean,
London Mulligan. Like, your 5's going to be good.
well, I don't think Javier's hand was even like that good, but it was playable, right?
Well, in this matchup, what good means on his side is that I'm
Yeah.
not dead right away.
Sure.
Game
sure.
1, he just got cheesed. Turn 2, effectively dead on turn 2.
Yep.
His hand made sure that wasn't going to happen, and then he had some valuable top decks to get ahead. And that's what his plan has to be.
Oh wait, love the minor adjustments from Javier. He's citing out the astrolabes on the draw, which actually makes a lot of sense. Your mana is not under attack in this matchup, so you don't need to astrolabe as much.
Right. The only mana that's under attack is your astrolabe from their Karn. So it's just a one mana. It's reach through miss as an artifact.
I was also thinking that you want to, like, he sided in 2 collaterals back in to reduce exposure to Chalice of the Void, I think.
That's smart.
Yeah.
Yeah, making these play draw adjustments is definitely, like, sideboarding is the hardest part of Magic, and then one of the master level sideboarding things is play draw adjustments.
Ooh, the often seen no white mana from the Bomberman deck.
So do you play Ancient Tomb and roll the dice on your bauble, or do you just ship that?
Well, I think that's what Julian's deciding. Personally,
I'm asking you, Jarvis. What do you do?
I abuse the London Mole and find another 7.
Yeah, I easily ship this. I don't keep sketchers with the London Mullet. Like, never keep a sketchy 7. There's no excuse. All right, Julian agrees.
This hand is much better. In fact, this is like 1, 2.
That's pretty close to a turn 2.
You can turn 1 bauble recursion, right?
He has to put one of these cards on the bottom.
Yeah. But don't you still have enough?
Right,
but there's a way on the void, so
wrecked.
Rats.
He swung for the fences and just got punished.
I mean, like on 6 cards, you definitely keep that hand. 100%.
Yeah, well, absolutely. You don't register Bomberman to not keep those hands.
Yeah. I wonder if we're going to see a good old-fashioned 2-4 versus 4-4 haste game.
But one of those costs 4 and the other costs 1.
Oh, we see an Oko instead, though. So, I don't know if it's going to happen, but there's a play you can make here, which is to brainstorm end step, looking to set up turn 2 Decay and turn 3 Oko. And the reason you would do that is you have to spend your mana on turn 1 to do so.
Right.
But I think this is going to force the action anyways.
The Chalice is definitely just going to force the play.
Pun intended.
Yep.
But I think it was actually a pretty interesting question if you're supposed to do that or not before this Chalice went on the stack. I don't know. I was thinking about it and I didn't come up with a good answer.
So what are you setting up turn 2 Decay for that's worth spewing a brainstorm like Mox Opal?
Yeah, so my reasoning would have been that Julian's on so low cards now that if you go after his mana, especially his colored mana, that he may never recover.
That's fair.
We'll see if Javier wants to spend his Oko Force of Willingness. I think it's like kind of an interesting decision. And
I'm definitely not doing that with 2 Decays in hand.
Yeah, look at that. He doesn't do it because he just has 2 Decays lined up. And you want to spend Oko to take care of the Salvagers or just start killing your opponent, right?
Yeah, Salvagers doesn't even have to target, or Oko doesn't even have to hit Salvagers. That adds a power to Julian's attack.
Yeah, right now what we have is what are your favorite 4-mana 2/4s unlimited?
Pillarfield Ox, probably.
Yeah, Julian has a Pillarfield Ox, and honestly, Javier's going to unload a bunch of mythics on him. And if you've ever played Booster Draft, that's not really what you want to have happen in booster draft.
Right. Yeah. If you draft the Pillarfield Ox deck and your opponent has Oko and Questing Beast, it's a bad time.
Yeah.
All right. Julian, finding lands, but that City of Traders, it's not free. It's
No.
it is a trader, you could say.
You pay a price for your soul lands in Legacy and Vintage. Well, more so Legacy, I guess. One of them deals you 2 damage, another one just decides to kill itself.
Yeah. it's a
Oh.
mix. Sometimes one's better, sometimes the other.
So someone has pointed out the wonderful interaction of Questing Beast being a legendary creature versus Caracas in Julian's hand.
That's my new favorite part of this match. That's the highlight of the night. I hope that actually happens.
I'm not gonna lie, I actually saw a Moto screenshot earlier of someone bouncing their own Caracas with Caracas because of Nissa Who Shakes the World.
Oh, that's so sick.
Yeah.
The classic Legacy noob play, followed by Nope, it's real.
Yep.
Yeah, Julian's pinned tweet on Twitter is him attacking with a Gaia's Cradle equipped with Umezawa's Jitte. So Nissa Who Shakes the World. Or that's the other Nissa. The different 5-mana Nissa.
Nissa Vital Force.
Does Julian see it? Does he know about Caracas?
Probably. I think.
Yes, he does.
I mean, so
he's not going to miss that.
One thing that's been going around a lot is a lot of the Maverick lists have started playing one Questing Beast anyways, so I wouldn't be surprised if Julian knew.
Yeah, he's bounced his own Questing Beast a few times.
Well, also Questing Beast overrides True Nemesis protection blocking.
Yes, it does.
So I don't think we'll see Javier
attack mode. Oh, there's no food. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. I was going to say, I don't think we're going to see Javier replay this Questing Beast for quite a while.
Yeah, not unless Julian taps out and gives a window to crack for 4. Oh, we're going to have the second Pillarfield Ox pretty soon.
Yeah, honestly, this is looking quite poor for Julian.
Yeah, it looks like we're going to get that game 5 that we were looking for.
Yeah.
We were worried that the match would end quickly.
Yeah, I mean, these games are not this game particularly is not the most exciting because we're seeing how powerful Leyline the Void can be versus Bomberman when the plan is to rely on salvagers. And notably, Julian didn't draw an answer for it.
Right. He also just hasn't seen a Monastery Mentor this game, which would still pretty much take over this board. And there's Force of Will, but we have Cavern, so like Mentor off the top right now, immediately make 2 monks. Like that's still good.
And if you notice, I think Julian's playing to that. You can see that because he hasn't played the LED or Opal, and also because those cards just don't do anything right now, right?
Yeah. Those cards' job right now in this game is to convert into monks.
How about another Pillarfield Ox?
All right. Pillarfield Ox Tribal. You never want to be white in Zendikar Limited anyway, so you might as well get your Ox on. Hit him with a Tandem Tactics. Or was that in the second Zendikar block? I don't even know.
I didn't remember anymore.
Windborne Charge. That was the white card.
That's the one that killed your opponent every time you cast it.
Yeah. Just 2 creatures get huge and fly now.
Yeah.
That would end this game.
I was going to say, Julian would prefer to draw that and a way to cast it.
Yeah, he's pretty close.
Caverns on Construct.
All right.
Which sort of makes sense.
Trying to burn him out.
Yeah, but the problem is with food generation, that's not actually that easy, right?
Right. So Javier is in an interesting spot where generating food saves more damage than converting a creature into an ox, which actually increases damage. But converting his food into an ox or into an elk, whatever bovine creature oxen. This is, yeah.
It's a zoo.
It's an entire zoo. There's birds and elks. Oh, he just made the trade. That's the play. All right. Now we're done.
that's actually pretty smart, I think, because but unfortunately, what's the cavern naming?
Construct. Bummer.
Yeah, bummer.
Julian is too smart. Outsmarted himself.
Yeah.
Maybe
The problem is you pretty much had to decide last turn, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's going to work out poorly in this scenario, but don't blame him.
Yeah, there are more humans in the deck, but the construct is better.
Yep. And
except for this human. I mean this elk.
Or this pitch the second Oko.
Yeah. This force of will target mostly.
Yeah. Oko ruining games by being a blue card to pitch the force of will.
Yeah, that's how Oko ruined this game for sure.
For sure. You know it.
So how does Julian win this game now? Assuming Javier draws nothing ever again, nothing relevant, despite having Jason brainstorm, is there even time to... He would need Disenchant plus Ballista or Karn.
I mean, I think, frankly, the way that Julian would win would be for Javier to get slightly too aggressive, never crack a food, and get double ballisted out.
Yeah, like tap out for Questing Beast and then die. But
yeah, but
I think if Questing Beast drops, the clock is over.
I also think that Julian can safely assume that the Questing Beast has exited a long time ago from this game.
Yep, I mean, Julian did foolishly tap the Caracas. Now is the time to get that beast questing.
Crack for 4.
Yeah.
It's going to be lethal damage next turn, obviously, from Oko, because 3/3s
Julian has a food now, which turns on Mox Opal and gains 3 life.
Oh, that's very clever, actually.
You can tap Ancient Tomb to gain 1 life, effectively.
Yeah. I think that might not end up working out.
No, I don't think he has time to make that play. But it's there if he wants it.
It really looks to me like the Pillarfield Oxes and the XXs are not going to be good enough versus the literal zoo we got over on the other side.
Yeah, Julian is definitely DED here.
Lou Dobbs, one might say.
I guess one could say that.
Blame Steve Rubin for me adopting that one.
Yep. That is a classic Rubinism.
So we can put one more counter on this thing, right? We float a white from Opal, crack it. Does that do anything?
You like white? You like white mana? Does it have to be white? Any mana?
No. It could be green.
Right. Yeah, the powerful Jace the Mind Sculptor.
Well, Javier takes it down in 3. After the first 2 games, after the first game, I was kind of worried about the match. He got killed so quickly, but Land of the Void really proved its power in those post-war games.
Yeah, this was a classic case of a Busto combo deck versus a fair blue deck. And after board, the fair blue deck takes out their bad cards and gets lots more good cards. And then they're able to make the other deck play fair, which the blue deck is better at.
So Julian's down to one last deck, and I don't know if you looked at the deck list.
Oh, I did. I'm ready for this.
We got the EW Landon special rolled up, y'all.
The goat is here.
Black Red Reanimator.
Let me see those goat emotes in the chat for EW Landon subs. Get some goats flowing.
Get some goats flowing. I guess we'll go. I guess we'll get the match ready, right, Anu?
I see some talk about a raffle. No raffle. I lied.
No, we were tricked. All right, so we'll be right back with the last match. It should be an exciting one. right, welcome back, everyone. I'm here with my good friend Brian Koval, and we're down to the last match between Julian and Javier. And boy, is it going to be fireworks. What do you think, Brian?
Well, like I said last round, I think that the combo deck is heavily favored game one against the fair blue deck, and then the sideboard comes into play. And Leyline of the Void, again, is going to be super clutch. Can Javier find it and still have a functional hand left over or not?
Yeah, so let's take a look at Julian's exact version. So, for those of you who haven't seen this deck before, this is Black-Red Reanimator. The goal of the deck is to generally put Gristlebrand into play, draw a bunch of cards, maybe cast a discard spell or two, and you know what they say, Gristlebrand is greater than all.
Yeah, so generally, you want Grizzlebrand, and then you want a second creature before you pass the turn. Like Grizzlebrand is the engine, and the second piece is the hook.
And just keep in mind, there are some decks in Legacy that just cannot beat Gristlebrand by itself.
Right.
And I think Javier's deck, in the absence of Oko, can't really beat Gristlebrand straight up.
And he has 4 Icefang Coatls that, assuming he can reach a critical mass of snow permanents, he could trade with it after taking 7 at least once and Julian drawing 21 cards. So if you consider that answering Grizzlebrand, he's not just dead to it.
I really do not consider that answering Grizzlebrand. But yeah,
that's a fair take.
I think the post-board games are going to revolve around Reverent Silence versus Leyline of the Void. And I think the players are ready to take this matchup on.
All right, let's do it.
So Julian has won the die roll.
Oh, that's good for him. So he has unmask you into Thoughtseize me into turn 2 Grizzlebrand.
So if deck lists are known, do you go for the turn 1 unmask yourself and just
that is better. Yep.
I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, you're right. I got so excited that we had 2 discard spells that missed the obvious. Yeah, Javier just has the 2 forces in the main, right?
Yeah. If you are concerned about your opponent having Force of Will in game 1, I guess you can take a turn off. It doesn't cost you too much, right?
Right. So there's no Spell Pierce, there's no Spell Snare, there's no Fluster Storm. What are we really worried about if we pass here?
Mostly. So actually, interestingly, you can force checkmate if you just take the Oko, right?
Yes.
Because then Javier cannot draw a blue card and Force of Will in the same draw step, unless if he draws exactly Brainstorm, right?
Right. If he draws exactly Brainstorm, which draws Force and blue card in the 3 cards. All right.
And indeed, you see the Oko taken.
Yep, and once this monster sticks, it's in play.
Yeah.
Other than Oko, like you said.
Plague Engineer is not the draw you're looking for.
No. So Julian has the unmask myself, reanimate line. Yeah. If he draws a land, he can unmask his opponent. All right, doesn't have to do that. Or doesn't get to do that, I guess. But let's see how many monsters he passes the turn with now.
It's going to be hard because you can only draw 7 once, right?
7 times. Oh, yeah, the reanimate is going to take 7 life. Yeah, so he's going to do it once. But finding a land even on that 7 lets him Cabal Therapy. He knows there's 2 Zeniths in his opponent's hand.
So now you have Swamp, Petal. So you could Entomb for a fatty.
Oh, yeah.
Animate Dead It and unmask your opponent if you're scared. So that's pretty broken.
Might as well unmask here. Yeah, so what is the backup fatty? I don't have a lot of reps in with this deck.
I think on this
Elish Norn.
You could make a case for Elish Norn or Chancellor of the Annex, I think.
Right. Those are the 2 choices. Like, you don't get Ashen Rider here, and those are all of the creatures in the main deck.
Yep.
So Elish Norn wipes this mana creature. It turns off all Zenith for 1 targets.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm into that. It also increases the clock. Because
So the one
adds,
reason to get Ashen Rider is it works well with Cabal Therapy next turn.
Yeah, that's true. You could just put your opponent to 0 permanence.
Yeah, that's probably going to end the game, considering Javier has literally no lands.
Oh, Julian's unmasking himself to therapy right now.
Yeah, you could do that. So the cute part.
Oh no, he's not. All right.
Oh, okay.
I think that would be way too cute, but it's a thing he could have done. He could
Yes.
have put his opponent to 0 permanence and hit both of the Zeniths from their hand.
So I'm trying to envision a world where Javier wins and nope. Javier
He
switches
cracked
his
his match.
Vibrant.
Yeah. Looked at the screen where his deck was laid out, realized there was nothing in it, and conceded. I've made that play a lot of times.
I think so. Now we're going to get to the real games in the matchup, I think, because I think game 1 is really, really, really difficult for Javier. But obviously, the post-board games change the dynamic quite a bit.
Yeah, almost. Or so 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 cards in his sideboard definitely coming in.
Mm-hmm.
He probably doesn't want Veil of Summer, but also like maybe he does. It stops the discard spell, the turn 1 discard spell, if you have it on exactly turn 1, but it's pretty bad after that.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. Like, I'm not sure if you're supposed to have it in or not in this matchup. I haven't played with this particular deck, and I'm just not sure if you're supposed to have it in general in Legacy versus Reanimator.
Yeah, I don't think it's good. Just for the record, it's definitely unplayable on the draw, and there's like a small argument on the play, but I think it's real bad.
So here's the other thing: this Bug Xanth deck is full of like grindy creatures, which I'm not so convinced you're interested in this matchup, right?
Yeah, like Questing Beast probably has to go. Tireless Tracker, there's no time for that. Plague Engineer has barely any text.
And
I guess if you get 2 of them and name Zombie, you can answer Grave Titan.
Well, not really. I mean, I think you'd be really dead before that happened.
Oh, sure. I'm not advocating for this plan. I'm just saying it exists.
So I think what Javier is doing is he's taking out like the 1-ofs and 2-ofs that are not so impactful and trying to, yeah, so he only has 3 Veils in, it looks like.
He has 3 Veils in, or 3 Zeniths?
The 4 Zeniths are on the side and 3 Veils are in the 1-drop slot. From Julian's side, what do we have? We have a Magalhaes, 4 Reverend Silence, 2 Grave Titan, and is that a Lake of the Dead, I think?
Yeah, so his sidestep is to use Lake of the Dead to cast Grave Titan if he can't clear the ley line. And Magus is there as cheese factor if Javier gets greedy with his mana, just cast a Magus, and he has mountains. All right, looks like the game is queued up here.
Yep. All right, so we see 2 ley lines, but interestingly, Javier knows that Julian plays Reverend Silence as his answer, right?
Yes.
So
yeah, he's keeping 1 in the hand.
Smart.
Yes.
This is the exact point I wanted to make. Javier knows about deck lists, so you should not put the second ley line in.
Yep, that was super tight. That's a world-class play. Pay attention, folks. That ley line will improve a future brainstorm. Also, he could reasonably get to 4 mana. His deck's plan wants 4 mana at some point.
Yep.
So he could redeploy that one if he gets a window after the first one is cleared. That was awesome.
Yep.
Like right now, that brainstorm already turning that ley line into a real card.
Yeah, funny what putting brainstorm into your deck does to your deck.
I know, it just makes everything better.
Yep.
Yeah, Julian notably did not register a single brainstorm tonight.
Yeah, I mean, the London Mulligan did improve non-blue decks. Oh my god, there's a Reverend Silence, but
ooh, and he just shuffled away his backup ley line.
But there's a Forcible plus Collateral, so.
Oh well. We thought we were gonna have some fireworks, but
I mean, we are gonna have some fireworks. Javier's
Yeah,
gonna
we're
get
still gonna get
gain
fireworks.
6 life.
Yeah, he's
5
gonna
life,
gain
6
6
life?
life.
Yeah, it's 6, right?
Yeah, it's 6. It's gonna become 5 from the force.
Yeah.
Pitching Oko. All right, he wants to be the snake flash. Oh no, he pitched a snake. I thought he had Oko for
Yeah.
a second there. Yeah, you definitely want Oko. That's your real out to a resolved monster.
Yeah, but also Oko just puts the pressure on so quickly.
Yeah,
in
like
this
right
scenario.
now he's gonna start crunching for 3.
Yeah, it's like 3 damage and 6 damage. Then 9 damage would put Julian to exactly 1, and that's assuming that nothing else is cast, right?
Right.
So that adds up pretty quickly.
Yeah, so Julian needs Lake of the Dead right away to cast this Grave Titan. Or I guess he just needs a
Yeah.
land. He has the pedal. All right, he's closer than I thought. Just land off the
Ooh.
top, cast it.
Jason the Mind Sculptor, though. How good is that one?
It slows down the clock a lot if he takes time to cast it.
Yeah. So Javier actually agrees with you and just plays the collateral.
Yeah, he's just trying to get this game over.
Yeah.
All right, let's see. Can we punish that line with a Grave Titan? It's not even a punish though. Like Jace will bounce the Grave Titan. The Lotus Petals are gone, and you just have 2/2/2s to their 3/3/3s.
So now I think that line is mostly shut off unless if Julian draws exactly Dark Ritual next turn, because you're not allowed to crack the fetch line the next turn.
Right.
Meanwhile, Javier can crack all of the fetch lands he wants.
Yeah, you can crack everything. That speaking of cracking, here comes 10 damage to Julian's 10 life.
Oh. Okay,
yeah, he cast a coatl since the last time you did your math.
Yep. Forgot about it clearly, but I just wanted to highlight how good it was of Javier not to put the second ley line into play.
Right.
I saw the play developing and I'm like, Javier's smart. He'll figure this out. Plus, you get an extra card out of it.
Yep. Jarvis and Javier, world-class legacy players.
No. I'm very lucky most of the time.
That is true.
All right.
What is
Jeff. -2 Thoughtseize +2 Chancellor on the play. Makes sense. I think Chancellor goes dead pretty quickly, especially on the draw, but on the play, it gives you more outs. And honestly, it makes sense Javier wouldn't change anything because, well, all of the good cards are in his deck now, right?
Right. Yeah. That's like the mid-range blue. It's these are the good cards. Like in a matchup this polarized where your plan is exactly don't let them put a monster into play from their graveyard, you probably don't have a card that's better on the play than the draw.
Right. All right, this is the decider. Ooh, another ley line.
Yeah, ley line versus
Chancellor.
Nothing.
Yeah, but that hand is like only okay even if you do hit. So I think we're going to see another 7-card hand, right?
Yeah. Julian's got a mulligan this. It doesn't even do anything.
Right. Javier's hands like that. You keep these hands once you decide to play a deck like this, right?
Javier's hand is great. He has turn 1 ley line, turn 2 Leovold.
Oh right, you can chop Zenith for
for Dryad Arbor.
Yeah. One awkward point is your Astrolabe becomes dead, but I think he's okay with that.
You don't need it. You have Leovold and Leyline.
Look, I'm just saying that's the only bad part of this, right?
Yeah, Leovold also just like dunks on.
So here's a play I foresee happening: unmask our opponent, reanimate their thing.
You're gonna have to at this point.
But he didn't go for that.
Oh wow, yeah, wow. What if he put Leovold into play right now? He would probably win the game immediately.
I agree, but now it's gonna be a lot harder.
But like, that definitely would have been very good.
So I think in terms of sequencing, it might be slightly better to unmask first because you gain a small amount of information.
Yeah.
So instead of casting the looting, then you could cast reanimate if you let on with unmask. Forcible
Yeah.
off the top is actually a pretty big draw.
Yeah, I think that ended the game. Like Julian has a land off the top would have gotten that Leovold into play if not for this Force of Will. So yeah, that was the best possible.
Ooze is going to be another hoop to jump through. Like just in terms of like locking the game down, right?
Yeah, just the natural ooze. Found that. Veil of Summer is in the deck.
Yeah, I just think Javier has so many like cute cards that he wants to take out that, you know, it's better to have a Veil to try to mise a Thoughtseize or an Unmask or something like that, right?
Yeah.
So probably time for. Actually, what is it time for?
On which side? It's time for Julian to draw a land. All right.
All right, there's a land.
It's time for him to try to put this Leovold into play. Wow, he's just not. Oh, Ooze is in play now. Yeah, he can't do that.
Yeah, you that option is not on the table.
Exhume and Reanimate go into the bin. He's got to try to power out this Titan.
If you draw second Dark Ritual, it actually works.
Yeah, or the Lake.
Oh, but there's a blue card for the Force of Will now.
Womp womp.
Yep.
I'm feeling many mixed emotions because Julian is one of my favorite people, but Blackheart Reanimator is one of my least favorite decks.
Oh my god, there's a second ritual!
Julian just felt a breath of life, and it's going to be ripped from his chest.
Ironically, Breath of Life is also a reanimation spell.
I know. That would also be a dead card.
Force will probably end it on the spot.
Splat. Julian can't give up now. Oh, he gave up now.
Oh, so the reason to give up now is Julian has to play in the losers bracket now.
Yeah, there's up to 5 more matches of Magic tonight.
I know. It's
already 9:30 on the American East Coast here, so it's like 1,000,000 o'clock in Europe.
Really, Magic is a marathon, not a sprint, and boy, Julian's going to feel it tonight.
Yeah, he is. I hope he has tomorrow off from work.
I think he's used to toughing it out. He's a tough guy.
All right, well, see you all for the next round.
Yeah.
It was fun being in the booth.
Yep, take care, man.